Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Town of Islip Wednesday, July 15th, 2020 Planning Board meeting. I thank you all again for joining us virtually as we work through the pandemic that we have going on here in the United States. I hope all of you are safe and your families are safe and well also. If you're just joining us and did not hear me earlier and you'd like to speak on an application, if you're a member of the community and it's a public hearing, please click on the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. When you click on that, please enter your name, address, and which application you'd like to speak on. If you're an applicant, please also hit the Q&A and let us know which application you would like to speak on. We have two housekeeping items. Item number 3, Take Two Brewery has been adjourned, will not be heard this evening. And item number, let's turn a couple of pages here. Item number 15, Sunrise Development Inc. has also been adjourned, will not be heard this evening. So if you're here for those two, they are not heard this evening. You could check back with the Planning Department to find out when they'll be back on the agenda. If you're dialing in by phone, not to worry, I will let you know during the public hearing. You can hit *9 on your phone if you'd like to speak, and we'll call on you at that point to go ahead and speak. As you're approaching a member of the community, as you're speaking, you're limited to 3 minutes. As you're getting close to the 3-minute mark, we'll let you know that you're getting close to the 3-minute mark. Just want to do a quick roll call on the board, and then we'll go ahead. Mr. Brown?
Present.
Mr. Moriarty?
Present.
Mr. Frugiari?
Present.
Mr. Bruno?
Present.
Mr. Matamore?
Present.
Thank you. And Ms. Cruz unfortunately cannot join us this evening. Thank you. So with that, I'm going to call the first item. Major subdivision preliminary approval, public hearing, Martinez Estates, MS 2017-003, east side of American Boulevard, 198 feet north of Burt Court, Brentwood, 361 and 365 American Boulevard. Applicant requests preliminary approval for a 6-lot major subdivision, 2 existing homes, 4 new. Is the applicant here?
Hello?
Yes, hi. I don't know if I'm supposed to be speaking first, but I'm the surveyor for this subdivision, Lisa McQuilkin. Joseph Gabriel is the architect. He's on board as well. I thought he would introduce it, but I'm here to stand by this subdivision. It's all conforming. We've gone to great lengths with Tanner and other members of the town, as well as the Board of Health, and everything here is up to par with all the standards that we were asked to put on this map. And Joseph, I think he's going to go next.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay,
Yes.
so this is a subdivision, 2 existing houses fronting on American Boulevard, and those would remain, and the 4 houses on the cul-de-sac Helmick Street. These all conform to the requirements from the planning staff. Board of Health is on board with the size of the lots and the required drainage. We would get water and gas once we are comfortable that this is in fact the design. So I think that's everything that you folks need from us. We'd be curious if there's any public discussion.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to go to public comment and then to a staff report, and we'll come back for questions. If you're just joining us and you're on the phone and would like to speak on this application, please hit *9 on your phone. Will allow you to speak. If you're also joining us late and you'd like to speak on this, please hit the Q&A function, or please hit the raise your hand function on the bottom of your screen, and we will call on you for this application. The first member who signed up to speak, is it Denise? Is it Lahat?
Denise is on my
I
staff.
I work for Lisa McQuilkin. I just put down that I can answer any questions if needed. I don't have any questions myself.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing anyone else raising their hand or anyone else signed up to speak on this, I'm going to turn to Mr. Gonzalez to give us a report.
This Residence A zoned, almost 2-acre site is currently comprised of 2 lots with frontage on American Boulevard. Improve with 2 single-family dwellings CO'd in 1948 and 1961. Both dwellings will remain, and the back portions of each lot will be divided into 4 new lots with access on the newly constructed cul-de-sac to terminate at the end of the existing stub portion of Helmig Street. All lots slightly exceed the minimum 11,250 square foot requirement of the zone.
Tanner, can I ask you just to speak up a little louder?
Sure. Is this
Thank
a little bit better? All lots slightly exceed the minimum 11,250 square foot requirement of the zone. However, to my knowledge, and the applicant, correct me if I'm wrong, had to work out an agreement with the health department in order to satisfy their sanitary density criteria, as their requirements are about a ½ acre per lot in this area. The new terminus of Helmig Street is a standard 60-foot radius cul-de-sac and will eventually be dedicated to the town of Islip. All roof runoff is being accommodated by typical dry wells on each lot, with other impervious areas such as the driveways and the new cul-de-sac pavement being accommodated by leaching structures in that new right-of-way. No recharge basin is required, as the total stormwater runoff is under the 4,000 cubic foot threshold. As has been required by DPW, in order to take roads for current dedications, the center island will be removed from the plan before ultimate approval. That's still shown on the plan. I'll work with the applicant's design professionals on that.
Tanner, just going to put you on hold 1 second. Barbara, can you hear him fine for the record? You're still muted.
Yeah, it's going in and out, so I can catch pieces and then he fades in and out, so. I think
Kind
he's
of
got-
Anything you can do in your own, try and speak up or bring the mic closer to you.
Okay, let me just, there might be some interference with the fan that's on, so let me turn that off. Let's see if that works. Okay, how is that? Is that better?
That's a lot better.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so standard concrete curb and sidewalk will be installed within the new road portion to connect to the existing network on Helmig Street. Staff has been working with the applicant and their design team to provide as much natural area in this development as possible. However, the small lot sizes make this rather difficult. 25% of the overall area exclusive of the road must be provided as natural area. Currently, per the attached plan, the applicant is proposing a bit under 17%. The areas proposed along the rear of lots 1 through 4 and the side of lot 1 are not ideal and may lead to encroachment in the future, although each natural area will be completely bordered by a 4-foot high post and rail fence with signage every 75 feet. The already small rear yard of lots 3 and 4 make the proposed natural area in this location even smaller. It may be best to eliminate this and instead have the applicant pay the waiver fee for the remaining area under 25%, which is at $5 per square foot, and to update the plan as shown. Unless we can work something out with the applicant as far as rearranging that area. Based on this, staff would request to hear any board comment before ultimately working with the applicant to address any necessary revisions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Mr. Brown?
Tanner, in the beginning of your report, you were talking about the requirements being met or not being met by the Suffolk County Health, because we couldn't hear you that well in the beginning of your report.
Yeah, so I was just basically speaking to the fact that the town's requirements is essentially 1/4 acre in that zone residence, single A. The health department requires about ½ acre, 20,000 square feet per lot. But to my knowledge, I believe they've been working with the health department in order to satisfy that requirement. And I'm sure Ms. McQuilkin or Mr. Gabriel can speak on that if they have any updates on that.
He purchased, Mr. Martinez has purchased some TDR from the Board, with the Board of Health. So that's all squared away. They've gotten that under control.
Thank you. Any further from the board? To the applicant, to Mr. Gonzalez's last point regarding the remaining area under 25%, have you discussed that any further? Or do you have any decisions on that from Mr. Gonzalez?
I think we probably have to reconvene on that just to see what we can hash out as far as the final layout of that natural area. But as far as the layout of the subdivision overall, that's really not going to change. So I'd be comfortable with, recommending preliminary approval subject to working that out.
Okay.
Can I ask one further question? I'm sorry, Tanner. When you were speaking before, you said something about the center island. Is that to come out now completely?
Yes.
Yeah. So on
Okay, makes sense.
on recent applications, DPW wants us to basically remove those as they become maintenance issues. So
Okay,
I'm
you
just
got it.
trying to be proactive about it before we have to bring stuff back. So
Absolutely. Thank you.
So if we recommend preliminary approval, both sides are in agreement here? And Mr. Gonzalez stated what he did, the applicant's okay with that?
I think that's pretty good. Sounds good for us.
Okay. Not hearing any other questions from the board, is there a motion? Going once,
I'll make a motion to close this hearing and grant preliminary approval of this application, subject to health department approval and the applicant working out the final details with town planning.
thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Frugieri to grant the application, to grant preliminary approval, subject to the health department approvals, as well as the final details being worked out with the planning staff. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Moriarty, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Item 2 on the agenda, site plan modification, public hearing, West Islip American Legion, SP 2020-030, southwest corner of Union Boulevard, County Route 50 and Chestnut Street, West Islip, 340 Union Boulevard. Applicant requests buffer relaxation in connection with the construction of an ADA lift in the rear of an existing American Legion Hall. Good evening to the applicant. The floor is yours when you're ready.
Okay, sure. I'm Alyssa Solar, Germano and Cahill, PC, 4250 Veterans Memorial Highway, Suite 275, Holbrook, New York, for West Islip American Legion, Post 1738, located at 340 Union Boulevard, West Islip. The American Legion is a social organization for active service members and veterans. The applicant seeks a modification of its site plan to allow for the installation of an Americans with Disabilities Act compliant wheelchair lift to provide individuals, including members and guests, access to the lowest floor of the existing building. Ancillary to the lift is the extension of an existing sidewalk and roof covering for weather protection. The owner of this existing building seeks to install an ADA compliant wheelchair lift to provide individuals access to the lower level of the building where Legion meetings and functions are held. To install the lift, a portion of the rear or south side of the building, which currently houses a staircase, must be extended to accommodate the lift. The extension of this part of the building calls for a relaxation of the town's minimum buffer requirement, as the south side of the property abuts a residential neighborhood. It should be noted that on January 13, 1976, the Zoning Board of Appeals issued Decision 3076, approving the American Legion's request to erect an addition to the building, leaving a setback of 17 feet instead of 25. The area housing the proposed lift would encroach into the approved 17-foot buffer, leaving a buffer of approximately 14 feet 8 inches instead. Additionally, the owner proposes to build a new 5-foot wide walkway along the west side of the building, which would run along the American Legion's west side parking lot. This walkway would connect with the walkway located at the north or front of the building and the parking lot to the west of the building to the area of the proposed lift. The southernmost point of the walkway would encroach into this buffer, leaving a buffer of 9 feet 8 inches. To alleviate concerns regarding any noise or privacy resulting from the encroachment into the buffer, additional evergreens would be planted in accordance with the town code along the southern property line, and the existing evergreens adjacent to the new proposed walkway will be protected during the construction. There has always been a staircase at the proposed side of the lift, so it would not be a new entry point here. There also is an existing front entrance of the building, which people are still able to use. It should also be noted that the existing parking at the location is not going to be changed, and the installation of the lift would not result in an increase of traffic at the location. Based on the foregoing, we respectfully request that the board grant the application to allow for the installation of an ADA compliant chairlift to provide access to the lowest floor of the existing building, as well as for an extension of the existing sidewalk and the roof covering for protection. Thank you.
Thank you. If you're just joining us and you'd like to speak on this and you're dialing in by telephone, please hit *9 on your phone now. We'll ask you to speak. If you'd like to speak on this and you haven't already signed up, please hit raise your hand. Mr. Molinado, I'm not sure if you'd want to speak on this one. Is this the application you're here to speak on? Mr. Molinado, I have you live. If you want to unmute, if this is the one you're here to speak on, your hand is raised. Okay, not hearing Mr. Maldonado, and not seeing anyone else who'd like to speak on this application, I'm going to turn to Mr. Gonzalez to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This split zone Business 1 and Residence B property is currently improved with the American Legion Hall, which was CO'd in 1965. Site plan was approved for a 20 by 40 addition on the west side of the building in 1979, which also included the proposal of paving, drainage, and landscaping on site. The hall was granted temporary relaxations of curbing and paving requirements every 2 years from approximately 1978 to 1989. The reasoning was they did not feel it was a good idea to install those improvements for a parking lot that may be destroyed when Suffolk County DPW eventually widened Union Boulevard. However, the widening plans did not happen for a long time, so they were required to keep getting extensions from the ZBA. At some point in the 90s, the sidewalk and curb were installed along the frontage, and the parking lots on each side were paved on site. In 2013, a revised site plan was finally approved for the revised parking lot improvements, which included drainage, increase of a rear yard buffer to 15 feet, and closing the curb cut on the eastern lot from Union Boulevard and relocating it to the adjacent Chestnut Street. At this time, the Legion Hall is requesting to install an ADA chairlift in the back of the building, as that is the only access point to the basement. This lift only encroaches about 4 feet into the existing 15-foot buffer. However, the required 5-foot wide ADA compliant path leaves a 9'8" setback to the rear property line. This would technically be the only other encroachment. They will be accommodating the additional stormwater from the small impervious area from the pathway and an existing storm drain, as well as planting a double row of 6-foot tall evergreens in a sawtooth pattern along the rear property line to screen the back of the building, where there is currently no vegetation of significance. The abutting property to the south has what appears to be a 6-foot solid PVC fence, which already screens them from the Legion Hall. As this is the only method to accommodate the chairlift, it must be located in this spot. Given the fact that a double row of plantings can be installed, the impact does not appear to be that significant. Conditions have been prepared if there are no legitimate concerns from the public or board at this time. Otherwise, additional measures can be supplemented, but staff recommends grant subject to the conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Any questions for Mr. Gonzalez or the applicant? Not seeing any. Is there a motion? Mr. Moriarty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would make a motion to close the hearing and grant the application subject to conditions that are attached.
It's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to close the public hearing and grant the application subject to the conditions. Is there a second?
Chairman, I
Second by Mr.
second the
Bruno.
motion.
Sorry, Mr. Brown, I got Mr. Bruno first on that one. Second by Mr. Bruno, with a late second by Mr. Brown. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it's approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 3 on the agenda, Take Two Brewery, I announced earlier, has been adjourned. Again, if you're just joining us and you'd like to speak on an application, please hit the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Let us know your name, address, and what application you'd like to speak on, and we'll sign you up for it ahead of time. If you're joining by phone and you'd like to speak, we'll allow you to do that during the actual public hearing itself. Item 4 on the agenda, Planning Board application, public hearing, Central Islip Chicken LLC, PB 2020-015, northwest corner of North Research Place and Carlton Avenue, County Route 17, Central Islip, 60 North Research Place. Applicant requests a Planning Board special permit for a restaurant in the PDDRS district pursuant to 68-324C 2D and TC 4701. Applicant also requests approval of signage as per 68-324C3A. Site plan modifications may also be requested as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board and the staff. Doug Hines, Design Development Group, Stony Brook, New York, for the applicant. It's good to see you all, however attenuated we may be in these strange times. We are proposing a straightforward application for a Popeyes restaurant, 3,028 square feet, 46 seats. Special permit criteria appear to be met. Traffic impacts, adequacy of parking, environmental impacts, effect on neighboring properties, and compliance with the comprehensive plan. We meet all the master plan guidelines for this PDD in terms of height, architecture, landscaping, streetscape, traffic mitigation, drainage, and signage. We've been discussing these matters with the planning staff. We will indeed comply with all master plan signage requirements per the town board's resolution that established this district. The proposed conditions by staff are fully acceptable. Signed and notarized originals will be delivered shortly to the town. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that is our application. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I'm going to go to public hearing, and then if there's anything after public hearing or questions, we'll come back to you. How's that?
That'd be fine. Thank you.
Great. I see public hearing. I see Larry Keenan. Mr. Keenan, you're okay. If you want to unmute, you can go ahead and speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
This is in regards to Narang,
I'm sorry.
Jonathan Narang property?
Central Islip Chicken, right? LLC.
Yes, yes. I'm just here to support John and his family.
Great. Thank you. I see no one else who wants to speak on this application. Is there anyone else who just dialed in that wants to speak? Please hit *9 now. If not, I'm going to go to Ms. Looks like we're going to go to Ms. Wozniak for a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property is located on the northwest corner of North Research Place and Carlton Avenue in Central Islip. It's the site of several retail stores and restaurant pad sites. Tonight, the applicant is looking to convert a former retail use to a Popeyes restaurant. The proposed restaurant will be approximately 3,000 square feet with 46 seats and will be located at the end tenancy of the larger Target retail building. Covenants imposed in 2005 for the entire multi-tenant shopping center permit additional restaurant uses on site with the approval of this board. Those covenants will also require cross-access between the shopping center sites, and looking at aerial imagery, the site has adequate parking to accommodate this use. In addition to approval for the use, the applicant will also require approval of signage as per the PDD code. The applicant will need to provide signage that complies in all respects to the covenants, which require channel lettering, and the applicant, as they stated, has agreed to do that. Based on this, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? All right, Mr. Hines, there are no questions for you, so we're going to, I'm going to ask if there's a motion.
Hey, before you do that, Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank Pat Dolce of the planning staff for her assistance in the application process, and Kelly Wozniak for always being prompt in her responses and professional. She's critical, but she guides us, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Is there a motion?
Chairman, I'd
Madam-
like to make a motion.
All right, Mr. Matamore beat you to that one, Mr. Brown. You're a little slow. Lucky you're not unfair. Mr. Matamore. You're on mute, Mr. Matamore. There you go.
I move to grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions as mentioned by Ms. Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Matamore. There's a motion by Mr. Matamore to grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Moriarty, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it's approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Item 5 on the agenda, I think Mr. Noreen and Mr. Keenan, we might have had you down and listed as number 4. I think you're for number 5. So we're going to go to planning board application, public hearing, Raj J. Noreen, PB 2020-016, east side of Lindsay Place, 73.63 feet south of Furrows Road, Holbrook, 3 Lindsay Place. Applicant requests to maintain existing encroachments in the required 25-foot natural area along the rear yard per filed map number 9982. Mr. Noreen, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, how you doing, sir? Good afternoon. Yes, I'm requesting if to keep the 25-foot, I think it's called the encroachment. I have filed the application with and submit all to Tanner. So, I'm asking if I could please keep it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Mr. Keenan for the public hearing, and then we'll go to Mr. Gonzalez for a report, and we'll come back with any questions we have for you.
Okay, Mr. Keenan is my neighbor.
Okay, Mr. Keenan, we're going to let you come back on now. Sorry that we had you sign up for the wrong one earlier. Go ahead, Mr. Keenan, you're on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so like I said, I'm here to support the Narangs, you know, what they have in their backyard currently right now. They have done, listen, they are great citizens for this community right here. They've done a lot for this area with the front of our property here in up that butts off of Furrows Road. So they've done anything, but they've made this area in this particular road look a lot better than some of the things they've done. So I'm all for them doing what they're doing and supporting them.
Thank you. If anybody else would like to be heard on this application, you dialed in by phone, please hit *9 right now. We'll allow you to speak, or if you came in late by computer, just hit the raise your hand button at the bottom. Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Mr. Gonzalez to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This Res AA almost half-acre site is currently improved with a single-family dwelling, CO'd in 1999. The lot itself is subject to a 25-foot rear yard natural area as part of the map of Lindsay Estates, which was filed in 97. The applicant applied for a C of C for a rear yard gazebo and deck in 2010, which was signed off the following year. The pool with patio was CO'd in 2011 as well, although part of the patio and pool equipment is technically in that natural area. The applicant applied for a second-story addition to the main dwelling in May of 2016, where these encroachments were once again identified by the building department. Per the zoning division, the shed, pool, and retaining walls were all part of the 2010 and 2011 C of Cs, although going through the scan in the file, the shed was supposed to be relocated out of the area, and the retaining wall was under 18 inches, so it did not require a permit. The sports court per available aerials was constructed sometime between 2006 and 2009. In regards to the impact on the area, this property, as well as the adjoining properties to the north and south, all abut a large recharge basin for the development, which is bordered by Furrows and Nichols Road. So in terms of what is affected by having less green space along the rear, it is not harming a actual residence. From 2016 aerial photography, a few properties appear to have landscaped the area, but for the most part, the only other property with structures present may be the adjacent lot to the north, although it's hard to tell from the aerials. The recharge basin is heavily planted. The property maintains a 6-foot-high fence along the back for screening, and the area is landscaped beyond that retaining wall. As this natural area is not protecting any residents to the rear, these encroachments do not pose a significant adverse impact on the area. However, the town of Islip does have a natural area requirement for all major subdivisions in order to protect a certain amount of vegetation. Staff would like to hear any comments. However, conditions have been prepared, which are in line with recent applications heard before this board. We recommend the shed, as the building department originally directed, be relocated out of the natural area, and the current location be infilled with a mix of arborvitae or other plantings to the satisfaction of the engineering division prior to issuance of any CO. A copy of those proposed conditions are attached to your packets.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Ms. Narino, have you seen those conditions and the moving of the shed and planting the landscaping there?
In 2008, when I had filed for a permit for my gazebo and the pool, well, I had a contractor file for the permit for the pool. The shed was there, and when I had the inspection and they came back, they never asked me to move the shed. And I left it right there, like all my pool equipment and everything is there. So if I have to move it, I have to move it. I have no other choice. But if it's possible that I could keep it there, I greatly appreciate it.
When you say the pool equipment is there, is the filter and stuff that's actually?
Yeah, like everything is like on the side of it. My pool panel is like screwed onto it,
Is there plumbing and electrical?
No,
or is it just
sir.
supplies?
No, sir. Just all my equipment is there, and I keep it for storage for like the pool equipment.
And I mean, from our perspective, and Mr. Gonzalez, correct me if I'm wrong, that's traditionally what we've done on this. The major things we're leaving in place, allowing them to encroach, and we're just asking that the shed be pulled out.
Yeah, I mean, if it can be moved, that would be our recommendation.
Well,
It's not on some type of slab or it's housing fixed equipment. It's what we've done for other applications, especially recently. So, that would be our recommendation.
The shed, it's not on foundation or anything. It's just like sitting on 4x4 pressure treated wood. But the problem to move it is the way like the pool is and the slides and everything. It's going to be kind of hard for it to pass. So if it has to be moved down, I'll have to break it down completely.
Are there further questions or comments from the board on this or on the shed in particular?
Chairman?
Brown?
One more thing, please. And the shed is also 4 foot away from my neighbor's fence. But of course, it's in the, where the recharging basin, where the Town of Islip owns that. The fence is also 4 foot away from that fence.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Oh, yes, I would concur with Tanner that in order for us to make and overlook the other items on the list, I agree that the shed should be moved.
Any further comments or questions from the board? So, Mr. Mead, I think it's not a permanent foundation under it. There doesn't appear to be electrical or plumbing in there. We're certainly willing to grant the more substantial things that you need that are already there, which I think related to it looks like the tennis court and the pool area. So we would ask to be consistent with others that we move that. Mr. Bruno, do you have a question?
Yes, I'm trying to understand, Tanner. We've got this natural area, and I'm bringing it up on this, but we've had a few recently. I mean, with all due respect, he's completely obliterated it here. Okay, for all intents and purpose, it's been ignored. And we're saying that since he ignored it, it's okay to ignore it. Are we now saying, and I really want to ask this, are we now saying, well, the neighbors can ignore it?
Yeah, I mean, I get your point, Mr. Bruno, and you know, we have to kind of work with the applicant compared to, you know, what the building division has looked at and inspected over the
Mhm.
years as far as permits are concerned. So, you know, I completely understand, you know, the natural area was a requirement, should have been aware of it. You know, when other permits were signed off on, you know, for some reason these things weren't caught, you know, so we're trying to find an appropriate middle ground. So, you know, we can't.
And
rip the roof off, but we're trying.
I agree with that. I mean, there have been some issues some things granted. I guess all I'm saying, and one, let me just also say that, so obviously my opinion is the same as everybody else's or that have spoken thus far on the board, that I would support the movement of the shed. I'm supporting anything that obviously gets this at least to some semblance, at least it'll get a major structure out of there. The only other thing I guess I'm saying, Tanner, is we're starting to see more and more of these, and I'm starting to wonder, I'm asking you when you guys are reviewing these to be careful about where you're putting these, because they're, especially the ones in the back, are really becoming, nobody sees them. And I understand what people may not know about them even. I mean, I understand it's in their deed. You know, I bought my house 40 years ago. I couldn't tell you what's in the deed today. So I understand what people may not even realize it, but I just want to get to the point that I'd like planning to look at it in such a way that we can try and minimize this going forward. I guess that's all I'm saying, because we're starting to notice this, and I can see where it's happening just in the normal course of people doing things to their houses. That's all.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, going forward, especially with the recent, you know, subdivisions that we've been bringing before the board, if it does have to be located along the perimeter, you know, we're clearly establishing the line with a fence, signage, covenants and restrictions, you know, so that's going to be stated on deeds, etc. But I agree, if it can be avoided from putting it, you know, along the back where, you know, usually you can't see it unless you're going onto the property, you know, then that would be the best course of action. So I agree with that.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Brown, was that?
Yes. I would just like to say for Mr. Bruno's sake and for Tanner also that I wouldn't be supporting this if it wasn't for the fact that the town issued a CFC in 2010. Once we did that, and I think we're obligated to agree to move forward with this. But on other applications, the ones that we had to review, we've had the same problem with. But if it's something that we didn't issue a permit or CFC on, I would definitely be opposed to it.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. And I concur
I agree,
with
Mr. Brown.
I agree with both Mr. Bruno's comments and Mr. Brown's comments. That being said, any further questions for Mr. Gonzalez or for the applicant? Would the applicant like to add anything further?
No, sir. When I purchased this house in 2006, all of these things were there, you know. So it's not like I put anything of it there. It was all, I purchased a house with all of that there.
Thank you. So that being said, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion.
Brown, you got it this time.
I make a motion to close the hearing and grant the application subject to the shed being moved and the other conditions being signed.
The motion by Mr. Brown to close the public hearing and grant the application subject to the shed being moved and the conditions being signed. Is there a second to Mr. Brown's motion?
I would second.
Second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it's granted, subject to the conditions. Thank you. Item 6 on the agenda, Planning Board application, public hearing, RMS Off-Road Inc., PB 2020-017, west side of Ocean Avenue, 253.30 feet south of Veterans Memorial Highway, State Route 454, 1630 Ocean Avenue. Applicant requests a planning board special permit for a vehicle repair shop in the Industrial 1 District pursuant to 68-340.1B. Site plan modifications may be requested as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant when you're ready.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Members of the board. My name is Keith Cordova. I'm representing RMS Off-Road from JM2 Architecture, 2410 North Ocean Avenue, Farmingville, New York. Pretty much the application is pretty straightforward. My client of RMS, who's been in business for over 34 years, has application of looking for a special permit in a new tenant space. The business is currently expanding, so they are looking to move into a new larger space. I'm here to take any questions, and that's pretty much it.
Thank you. I'm going to ask if there's anybody here who'd like to be heard on this for public comment. I do not see anybody signed up. If you're on the phone, please hit *9 on your phone now. If you're on the computer, please hit raise your hand at the bottom of the screen. Not seeing anyone do either one of those, I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property is located on the west side of Ocean Avenue, approximately 250 feet south of Veterans Memorial Highway in Bohemia. It's improved with the 15,000 square foot multi-tenant industrial building, which was built in 1996. Tonight, the applicant is looking to convert 5,000 square feet of the building to a vehicle repair shop. This change of use will require a 17% parking relaxation. The property is in substantial conformance with the most recent approved site plan, except for some plantings and the addition of a cross-access curb cut with the property to the south. In addition, there may be some unpermitted outdoor storage that will need to be removed. The property is located within an industrial area, and the applicant has agreed to follow the most recent approved site plan or file for an amendment. Based on this, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions, which require any overnight storage of vehicles as permitted in 68-3 to be behind the dumpster enclosure to provide adequate screening, and require the removal of any unpermitted storage that may be on the site.
Thank you, Ms. Wozniak. Ms. Cordova, you have seen those conditions. You're okay with them?
Yes, I reviewed the conditions as well as with my client and the property manager, and everyone is very okay with the conditions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions for the applicant or for Ms. Wozniak? Mr. Brown?
Oh, yes, for either Ms. Wozniak or the applicant. I wasn't clear, Kelly, on the storage of vehicles. You said behind the dumpsters? For the outside storage of vehicles?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the site plan. It's a little bit, yeah, if it's a little bit more clear if you look at the site plan. So basically the dumpster is surrounded by trees. So as long as they park the cars anywhere behind that, the trees in front of the dumpster should screen them from the street.
Is there a amount or a number of vehicles that can be stored back there?
Yeah, so vehicle repair shops are allowed to store up to 5 cars outside overnight without the additional special permit that you typically see.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions from the board? Would the applicant like to add anything further?
Sorry for the background noise. I apologize, having technical issues. However, I just wanted to make note of all the vehicles that my client will be working on. Everything is going to be stored inside for what it's worth, but just to clarify that, to add to it, that's all.
Thank you. Not seeing anyone else would like to be heard. Is there a motion? Mr. Matamora, got you beat, Mike. Sorry. Quick there. Just need to unmute though, Tim.
Yes, I move to close the hearing and grant the application subject to the conditions as already worked out between the applicant and Ms. Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Matamora. There's a motion by Mr. Matamora to close the public hearing and grant the application subject to the conditions. Is there a second?
I would second.
Moriarty, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it's approved. Thank you.
Thank you, members.
Item 7 on the agenda, Planning Board application, public hearing, Timothy and Beth Ann Walsh, PB 2020-019, west side of Percy Williams Drive, 1,523 feet west of Suffolk Lane, East Islip, 65 Percy Williams Drive. Applicant requests to maintain existing encroachments within the required scenic easement as per filed map number 6562, dated June 10th, 1977, map of Percy Williams Estates, section 2. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. My name is Keith Archer of Harris, Bloom and Archer, 445 Broad Hollow Road in Melville.
Can I just ask you to speak a little louder? Or
Oh,
get closer?
sure. My name is Keith Archer. I represent Tim and Beth Ann Walsh. I'm a partner at Harris, Bloom and Archer. And Mr. and Mrs. Walsh own the home at 65 Percy Williams Drive in East Islip. The home backs up to the Champlain's Creek, which is a navigable channel. There is a bulkhead along the rear of the Walsh property. And as you can see from some of the photos that were submitted with the application and the updated survey, there's a wood walkway that is basically runs along the bulkhead, adjacent to the bulkhead. But it's approximately 2 feet below the bulkhead. So what the applicant has done to prevent any falls and any injuries is they've erected a 4-foot-high shatterproof clear glass barrier, which has a very tasteful white rim around it, white trim, I guess. While the barrier was installed along the rear of the property adjacent to the water, only approximately 80 feet on the east side of the property is within the scenic easement area. To the extent that the intent of the scenic easement is to permit views of the water, this barrier does not block any view from the property, but it does provide a clear view to the water and also a level of safety from an accidental fall either onto the wood walkway or into the creek. So I would ask that the board approve the application in the interest of safety. I've taken a look and discussed with my client the condition that Mr. Gonzalez has sent, and my applicant is fine with that condition.
Thank you. We'll go to the public hearing and come back for any questions after the public hearing and staff reports.
Thank you.
I do not see anyone signed up for this. If you joined the meeting late or you're on the phone, if you're on the phone, please hit *9 now. If you'd like to speak, we'll allow you to speak. If you joined the meeting late, you can hit the raise your hand function at the bottom of the screen and we'd be happy to let you speak. Not seeing any virtual hands going up, I'm going to turn to Mr. Gonzalez to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This residence AAA zoned 3/4 of an acre site is currently improved with a single family home along the Champlain Creek. This property, along with several others, are subject to a scenic easement along the creek per the 1977 filed map for Percy Williams Estates, Section 2. The item before this board tonight is the construction of an approximately 4-foot-high white vinyl fence with clear glass through the middle. This fence runs along one of the existing bulkheads for the property, as Mr. Archer stated. It was flagged back in September during the zoning review for a pool permit. The southern half of this fence runs directly through part of the easement area. Per the addendum to the final resolution dated February 10th, 1977, within said area, no permanent structure above 4 feet in height or fences are to be erected. The applicant's representative, as stated before, maintains the fence was installed as a safety measure as the drop off from the bulkhead to the water is quite high. Although there already is a chain link fence that runs across the property in a compliant location, beyond that, there was no barrier. The clear glass does not appear to obstruct any views. Based on the language in the final resolution, it could possibly be interpreted that as long as the fence is no higher than 4 feet, it should be permitted. However, because of the nature of these applications, staff in the zoning division flagged it, and now the applicant is in need of a modification of those conditions or an interpretation by this board to allow the fence to remain. Staff feels as there is no legitimate opposition, this request does have merit and would ask the board to provide an interpretation of that resolution or grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you. Mr. Bruno, is that a question?
Yes, it is. Mr. Archer, I'm just curious, is this fence necessary for the pool? Is it part of the pool enclosure and protection that's required for the pool?
No, I don't believe it is. I believe that the fence that you see in the picture, which is, I guess, the chain link fence, is part of the pool enclosure. This was put up with the intention of protecting against somebody falling either into the water or onto the, depending upon where you are on the property, or onto the walkway that's below the property, by the bulkhead.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions for the applicant or for Mr. Gonzalez? Not seeing any. Would the applicant like to add anything further?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think the whole purpose of this is really in the interest of safety. It's tastefully done. It's clear. You can see through it. And it really doesn't obstruct, this scenic view that I believe the town was trying to accomplish.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez, do you need an interpretation from us, or a simple motion and an approval is sufficient?
Motion and approval would be fine, as I did prepare conditions, so.
Thank you. That being said, is there a motion? There was a tie there. I'm going to go with Matamore again, though. He beat you out, Mike. Mr. Matamore, unmute and you're good to go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I am very familiar with this area. I had the delightful experience of keeping a boat at that island right across the canal for 30 years, a small one, and I'm familiar with this property, and I think it has been tastefully done. I think the applicant is correct to state that fact, and made obvious efforts to make it as aesthetically pleasing as possible. So I commend them for that. And also that we're not hearing any opposition yet, and I doubt we will, from any neighbors who are saying that it impedes the quality of their scenic easement, which I think is revealing. So consequently, I do move to grant the application subject to whatever conditions are worked out with the planning department.
Thank you, Mr. Matamore. That was a motion to grant the application subject to the conditions.
Yes, it was. A little lengthy, but it was.
You have to close in the public hearing. Is there a second to that?
Yes.
Moriarty seconds that. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it's granted subject to the conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, board members. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 8 on the agenda, Town Board Application Public Hearing, IA Holdings LLC, CZ 2017-019, northwest corner of Suffolk Avenue, County Route 100, and Eastern Avenue, Brentwood, 849 Suffolk Avenue. Applicant requests a change of zone from Residence AAA District to Residence 3 District and Residence CA District in order to maintain a portion of the existing horse farm and redevelop the remainder of the parcel with 180 apartments. Applicant also requests town board approval to utilize increased density permitted in the CA District pursuant to Town Code Section 68-173.1. Applicant further requests a town board special permit for a fast food restaurant in the Business 3 District pursuant to 68-302G. Site plan modifications are required as part of this application. Good evening, Mr. Bazell.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the applicant, Joseph F. Bazell, the firm is Bazell, Bland of Visconti, 535 Broad Hollow Road, Suite B4 in Melville. The application seeks a change of zone. Most of the property would be rezoned to CA and be used for apartments as well as maintaining the existing horse farm. A small portion of the property would be rezoned Business 3, used as a coffee shop and for some commercial space. So there are 3 components. The horse farm is about 5 acres. We would develop the rest of that property, which is probably a total of about 16 acres with 180 apartments, so 180 apartments and the riding center. And then there would be 6,000 square feet of commercial with a coffee shop on a little more than an acre. This is the second hearing we've had on this project. There was a prior hearing. At the time, the proposal was based on the development of a new PDD. Planning subsequently determined to utilize existing town zoning districts. So due to the change of the relief, we're here for a second hearing. We have also made a number of revisions, including reducing the number of units, reducing the FAR, and reducing the height of some of the buildings. The prior plan had a mix of 3-story and 4-story buildings. This plan has a mix of 2-story and 3-story buildings. We believe that the proximity to the Long Island Railroad Station presents a unique opportunity for a transit-oriented development, or a TOD, a positive project for the property, for Suffolk Avenue, and for Brentwood, which will improve the property, improve the area, and provide an anchor for revitalization. The property is located at 849 Suffolk Avenue. It's on the north side, directly across from the train station. There is an existing light already located there serving the train station, which we would use for our entrance. It's just over 17 acres, irregularly shaped. About halfway back, it widens out somewhat on the west, with 936 feet of frontage on Suffolk Ave and 529 and change on Eastern Ave. It's level and grade. Almost the entire site is presently cleared because of the existing horse farm use. Same some foliage on the easterly side. No wetlands, existing traffic light. Currently, the access generally comes from a driveway located on Suffolk Avenue, which is not at the light, which is located just to the west of the light and runs on a right-of-way shared with the adjacent health center. There is also another small driveway that comes in off the rear. The existing riding academy has been around a long time. I've seen records indicating there have been horses on this property going back into the 1890s. But the riding academy has certainly seen better days, and the days when people would camp out on the lawn to watch horse shows are long behind us. The world has changed. The property's become worn out, out of date, and fails to serve the purposes that it could, both for its own self as well as for Suffolk Avenue and the Brentwood community. With the train station across the street, it's a perfect site for TOD rather. Normally, the walking distance would be about 10 minutes. This is literally across the street. Suffolk Ave is a sprawling array of nondescript, largely commercial and industrial buildings in need of upgrade and renewal. This is the largest property on Suffolk Ave, and it's across from the station. So it's a pivotal lot in a pivotal location, which will, its redevelopment will help redevelop and upgrade Suffolk Avenue and Brentwood. So on the east side, there's Eastern Avenue. The only access we have on Eastern Avenue is an emergency access requested by fire safety. Otherwise, there is no access to the complex for any other purpose. Adjacent to the west is the Ross Health Center. Then we have the Brentwood Parkway, which provides access to the Brentwood Golf Course. There are homes to the north on the south side of Prospect Drive, which abut the rear of the site. What we are seeking to do is preserve the horse farm and holding back about 9 acres to do so. We are maintaining the existing buildings, though we are removing some, we're refurbishing others. We'll build a new riding center and a new parking area, and we do the rest of the property to improve and upgrade it. There's a horse trail which will wrap around the rear of the property and then along Eastern Avenue, further integrating the riding academy into the use of the site. Now,
Mr. Bazell, you're breaking up a little bit. It might be a bad internet connection there, but you're just speaking a little slower and louder.
Better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Long Island generally, as I'm sure the board well knows, is about 75% single-family housing. Islip is 76. Brentwood has over 80% single-family homes. Compared to nearby counties, we're vastly overstocked in single-family homes and understocked in quality alternatives for residents to use who do not want to live in a single-family house, can't afford to live in a single-family house, or are not ready for a single-family house as of yet. The present application will provide diversified housing, which provides for vibrant communities, addresses growing societal needs, and also helps address the brain drain on Long Island. And what I mean by that is the loss of young people who are moving out at 3 times the nationwide rate. Many are not ready for a home yet. Many love living on Long Island, but the limited housing opportunities and the high cost of housing has an impact on their choices to where to stay. And losing our young people is losing our biggest resource. Quality diversified housing has a positive impact on economic stability, and a key component of that is alternatives and quality alternatives. Here we have a railroad station literally across the street, so anyone seeking to take the train does not have to commute at all, does not put vehicles on the road, does not even take up space in the train station parking lot. The site plan is laid out in a campus-like setting. The buildings are gathered centrally around the community building or the clubhouse. There are buildings on Suffolk Avenue, between the parking and between Suffolk Avenue for visual appearance. There are common recreation facilities for residents of the facility. Those are not open to the public, just residents of the facility. And then, of course, we have the horse farm located on the westerly side, taking up 5 acres. The residential apartments will share driveway access at the light off Suffolk Avenue with the commercial or B3 component of the application, which sits to the west of that curb cut, which will provide a coffee shop which would serve people coming and going from the Long Island Railroad Brentwood Station, residents of the complex, and the facility generally. The commercial building is about 6,000 square feet. It's modest. It would contain a coffee shop, as I indicated. There's a quality landscaping package wrapping around the site, along Suffolk Avenue, along Eastern Avenue, and then along the rear of the site as well. We are also connecting to public sewers. We will extend the sewer main to this particular site, so we do not have to put in a sanitary treatment plant or STP. Brentwood does not have sewers, and this has hampered its redevelopment by moving a main extension up to this point, a forced main extension. There is a potential for others to connect, because if you can bring to the entry point, you can then connect to public sewers, thus facilitating additional positive development in the area. Access is from a regulated intersection. There's a light there now. People can walk to the train station. They could also walk to the coffee shop or the commercial tenancies. The Riding Academy will maintain a separate entrance, but the Riding Academy is there as a component of the overall application, and it will be preserved as an important facet of Brentwood and Suffolk Avenue, its heritage and its history. So we have transit-oriented development with 3 components: a residential community directly across from the train station, diversified housing, which is needed in Brentwood and provides vibrant communities and addresses current housing needs, particularly for those who do not desire to or cannot at this point have a single-family home, and those who commute by rail. We will provide workforce housing for the next generation of Long Islanders. The retail component will serve the passengers taking the Long Island Railroad. It's quick, it's convenient, it's literally across the street. The residents of the community, as well as the Brentwood community at large. The sewer main extension will allow positive development of other properties and eliminate the need to put an STP on this particular property. Attractive redevelopment of a unique and key property now worn out and out of date will upgrade the visual quality and appearance of the property in the Suffolk Avenue corridor, provide an anchor for redevelopment, and will have a positive impact on this property, Suffolk Avenue, and on Brentwood in general. That is the presentation. I do have, I believe, some of my other experts involved in the application here to answer any questions that I may not be able to.
Thank you. So we'll go to public comment and then we'll come back after a staff report for questions. Mr. Brown, before I go any further, did you want to?
Yes, I was going to ask you if you could ask Mr. Bazell to go over the Riding Academy and what they're going to keep there, because his microphone was breaking up and I didn't get to hear exactly what the plans were for the 5 acres.
Sure. The Riding Academy is located in the westerly side of the lot. That's generally where it is centered now. Though they have facilities elsewhere on the property, they don't get a lot of use. The existing buildings, most would remain. Some will be refurbished, some will be replaced. There is a new indoor arena that is proposed. There is a new parking area that is proposed. Right now, the parking area is largely just dirt. There's a large horse paddock that is also going to be upgraded and rebuilt. And the entranceway would be improved to make it more viable and make it more usable and user-friendly. We're also decreasing the number of horses we're keeping, but we're still maintaining it as a riding academy, and we hope it becomes a vibrant one, much more so than it is now.
And what about the trails around the property?
Well, there is a trail, you can see it on the site plan. It runs along the rear part of the residential units from the Riding Academy area, and then it wraps around the side and runs in a loop along Eastern Avenue. The emergency access area would cross it, but other than that, it would be landscaped.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to turn to the public hearing section. If you've already signed up, we'll call you in the order which we have you signed up. If you've not signed up for the hearing and are joining us late, you can either hit the raise your hand button at the bottom of the screen, or if you're on the phone, hit *9. And once we go through those that have signed up, we will call upon you to sign up. I just want to note for the record, she's not here this evening, but State Senator Monica Martinez has sent me a letter in opposition to the project. I will not read the whole letter, just the paragraph that states her opposition. Preserving the historic character of this community is of the utmost importance to myself and its residents. For this reason, I respectfully oppose the approval of the aforementioned request for change of zone for this location. If Knoll Farm were to be converted to 180 apartments with only a portion of the farm to be maintained, it would change the historic nature of this community. The change of zone will negatively impact the traffic congestion already present on Suffolk Avenue, as well as the overcrowding of this community. Transforming this parcel of land to apartment units will also negatively impact the environment. There's not much green left in Brentwood, and therefore it should be preserved. That's just the one paragraph I read from her letter. I'm going to turn to the first person I've signed up here. I believe it's Fuad Farouque. And if I butchered your name, I apologize for that.
Hello?
Yes, hello, go ahead.
Hi, yeah. My name is Fuad Farouk. I'm a current epidemiology student at Columbia University and a lifelong resident of Brentwood. I'm going to speak on my opposition to the project. I do believe it's a good idea in concept. However, I think Brentwood needs more local businesses, not increased population density that could put a strain on the school and the school district overall. Brentwood itself has 60,000 people already on it. North Bayshore has 19,000. Baywood has 7,500. All that together is about a quarter of the population of Islip right there. Overall, I mean, Senator Martinez is right. There's not much green left in Brentwood. And overall with the community, driving is hectic as it is on Suffolk Avenue. I think with 180 permanent families that would be there, it would be even more congested than it is now. And that's my 2 cents on the matter.
Thank you very much. We have Marvin Toussaint.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, yes, my name is Marvin Toussaint. I thank you guys for the opportunity to be here. I'm a lifelong resident of Brentwood. I currently work on PSEC Long Island's energy efficiency program, so I definitely committed to Long Island, the community here. I'm also uncomfortable with this development. There are a few reasons for that. I'm glad that the senator and Farouk, who went before me, both mentioned the traffic issue. I saw in the plan that they're planning for about 293 parking spaces. Obviously, all of those parking spaces wouldn't be filled all the time, but even with half of that, 140 something odd cars, I just don't think that particular part of Brentwood can sustain that much traffic. I actually live, from where I live, I can walk to the Brentwood train station, and I pass the No Farms a lot when I do so. And during rush hour, to go from one end to Suffolk Avenue to the other just takes so long. All the major arteries in Brentwood are congested during rush hour. And I just don't think that a development of this size can be absorbed by the community. I think it's going to just make the traffic situation worse. Also, I know that Brentwood was one of the hardest hit communities due to the coronavirus. I know Newsday published an article, statistics show virus spreading in Long Island's dentist communities. Confirmed coronavirus cases have increased across Long Island, producing concentration in some of the island's dentist communities. Brentwood had the highest number of cases at 368, and that was on April 1st. A lot of that is because of the density of Brentwood, as well as kind of the working class nature of some of our families who don't have health insurance or maybe undocumented. And I think just kind of throwing more density into Brentwood at a time like this, it just doesn't seem like something that the community really needs. I do agree that, no farms, like people in Brentwood don't really go horseback riding. It's mainly people from out of town. Obviously, it's part of Brentwood's history. And so if we can maintain that and preserve that, I think that's beneficial. But the idea that we could kind of redevelop that site isn't something I'm opposed to. I just don't think we can handle the increased traffic. Also, I think that, yes, it's possible that people will cross the street and take the train into the city. But those people will still need to buy groceries, still need to, if they work somewhere outside of the city, if they want to visit people they love, they're still going to need cars, they're still going to be on the roads. So in general, I don't feel comfortable with this proposal in its current form. Obviously, like there's clearly potential on that site across the street from the train station. I don't think 180 apartments is the best use of that potential. I don't think 293 parking spaces are the best use for that potential. Lastly, I would also want to kind of, and I don't know if this is something.
I'm just going to ask you to wrap up. You're right.
Okay, no.
We can wrap up your last point.
Yeah, this is my first time at one of these things. I made my point. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have Diane. Diane, if you're ready, just unmute and you're okay to go. Diane, can you hear us? Can you unmute on your end? Okay, I'm going to come back to you, Diane. I'm going to turn to Eric W.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I have a question with regards to property taxes for the proposed area and also school funding and how it relates to that. What would be the estimated increase in property taxes that this would bring in? And how does that relate to the increased liability for schools in the area to fund the new students that would come from these presumably families who would move in? Would it make it so that schools were harder hit? Would they have a higher proportion of new students to new property taxes, or would it be the other way around? Has there been any estimates for that?
Great. I will, when we come back to questions, I will ask that of the staff and the applicant. Is there anything further you wanted to put on the record?
No, that's it.
Thank you. Next on my list, I have Joe Fritz. Mr. Fritz, you there? Mr. Fritz, if you're there, go ahead. You are active. I don't think your mic is working on your end. I'm not showing that your mic is active. I'm going to come back to you, Mr. Fritz, shortly. I'm going to turn to Doris Davidson.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, how are you? My name is Doris Davidson. I live in the area. This is the third time around that they have tried to attempt this. All around, Mr. Buzzell, with all due respect, you clearly do not live in Brentwood. Across the street, we have a major garbage issue, which is the train station, in case you have not seen it. 180 apartments in this area would just add to it. I do not think that you will personally or your client will be personally coming out to clean that area. We are actively out there, groups join to keep our areas clean. With that said, what about the schools? Have you heard what goes on in Brentwood in our school district? Our schools are busting at the seams. Teachers have over 30 children. What are you going to do when you have 180 families moving in? Each family has around 2 children. Where are these children? Where are you going to put them? That just adds to us, because I don't think your client's going to pick up the tab on the extra taxes that will be applied to us. We have been down this road many times since 2013, and it's time that we all keep coming back and charging at everyone, because you keep trying. And the sellers, listen, we get it. Times have changed. People do not ride horses like they used to. They don't camp out. That was one of the reasons why my parents moved here, because of Knowles Farm. I used to ride there. I used to do shows there. Okay, and I only live about a mile away. So times do change. Do you really think that people are going to be jumping off the train to get an apartment in Brentwood? I don't think so. In case no one's noticed, no one is moving into Brentwood. Everyone is moving out of Brentwood. So what's going to happen? It's the same thing that's across the street behind the train station is going to happen. Has anyone seen those apartments back there? Maybe you should take a walk down that road. It's on 2nd Avenue, the apartments I'm talking about. The same thing will happen. No one will care after a few years, and it will be a dump. And again, Brentwood will be dumped upon. We can't keep allowing this to happen. These people do not live in our community. They just come, they see the land, and they want to dump on it. Why don't we sell the properties? Why don't they sell the rights to the land to working farms? We'll maintain the land. There are a lot of farmers out there now looking for land. Let's do that. Let's have the sellers of the owners of that property sell it off to farmland. We'll maintain the green, which is what we need. We don't need 180 apartments. We don't need a coffee shop. We already have 10 coffee shops in Suffolk, right on Suffolk Avenue, if you haven't noticed, Mr. Buzzell. And maybe you and your client need to take a ride and drive down in Brentwood, instead of trying to build on land that you're selling a dream that ain't never gonna happen. It's never gonna happen in Brentwood.
Ms. Davidson, you had 3 minutes. I'll just ask you to wrap up, please. Thank you.
Thank you. We've been down this road, so we oppose this deeply, and we'll keep opposing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fritz, I think you said your mic is now working again? Mr. Fritz has disappeared from my screen. Are you there, Mr. Fritz? All right, Mr. Fritz, I did show your microphone was on and muted, but now I'm showing that it's off again. So I'm going to come back to you again. I'm going to turn to Maria Gonzalez Prescott.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Maria Gonzalez Prescott. I am a resident of the North Bayshore area for over 17 years. I'm also on the Brentwood Board of Education, and I'm opposed to this project, just as Senator Monica Martinez mentioned in her letter. This project has a potential impact in our schools. I don't know if the client has has done any school impact study on this project, and how many children will come out of these homes or apartments, because of the fact that if you look at Brentwood and North Bayshore and the single family homes, you're talking about, we range between 1 to 10 children coming out of a single home into our district. We are a very severely underfunded district for over 129 million each year for the last 10 years that New York State has owed us funding. So we are very severely underfunded. My question to the developer is, have you, like Doris mentioned, have you gone to other projects such as this that has been in the Brentwood area for a while? Look at the Hemlock Apartments. You're talking about Section 8. Have you looked at Wyandanch Rising? It was supposed to be a workforce type of housing, but now you have Section 8. So it didn't work there. And how do you think it's going to work in Brentwood? Also, my concern is, has there been a traffic study on Suffolk Avenue? Again, there's traffic issues there. And also, is there wetlands in this property? Have you done an environmental impact statement on this property? And again, I don't know if you could decrease the size of it. If, I would, suggest that you table this item, and also have a public hearing at the school, maybe involve the school district, because I haven't, or the client has not done that so far. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a Legislator Gonzalez. Mr. Gonzalez, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm just unmuting. Can you guys all hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the board. I am also calling in opposition to this project. I'm calling in because I have had a numerous amount of individuals in this community that I have met with, local groups that I have met with, residents in the area. I have met with many of the prominent residents that are around the Brentwood Country Club right behind Knowles Farm. I've had the opportunity and the privilege to have sat down with former legislator Rick Montano. And all with the same vigor, all of them with the same feelings and anger that you hear with just the few amount of people that have come to the Zoom meeting for the public hearing. I think also that under the circumstances here, everyone in unison is opposed to the project. I think Maria Gonzalez Prescott has said it very eloquently, that our schools, which are really busting at the seams, cannot take another hit of 180 families. Dropping 60 apartments from 240 is not going to make a difference. This has been a project that is dating back when they first approached Mr. Engel Berman about selling the property back in 2011. Going forward, I understand that we are moving into the future. I just don't think that this project is what's needed at that location at this particular moment. I am not saying that somehow later on, there is not a better project that can go into the Knoll Farms, because I expect that. But 180 units, 270 plus cars, spaces, is definitely something that this community is definitely opposed to. They're going to continue going forward. I just ask Mr. Chair and the members of the board to please table this. And for another particular reason, some of the people that would have loved to be on this public notice here today in your Zoom would have loved to be heard. Many are not savvy on the computer systems. And that's one of the reasons, due to the fact that coronavirus has scared so many people, especially Brentwood being number one in positive cases. We should be able to at least table this, Mr. Chair, so that we can at least give the individuals the opportunity to come forward when the opportunity arises. But we are definitely in unison opposed to this project. I thank you for your time and for the opportunity to listen. I would love the opportunity to sit down with you, Mr. Chair, and maybe the members of the IA, which I wasn't privy to. But please, I ask that you table this resolution, this changing of zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. And if anyone who was not savvy enough to get on here tonight, please let them know that they can send in letters either in writing or by email, and we do circulate them to the board members, and we will consider them as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Fritz, I see you're back, and I think if you hit unmute now, you should be able to go. I see your mic looks like it's active if you hit unmute. Nope, you went offline again, Mr. Fritz. I don't know what's happening there.
He's gonna try to call it.
Okay, if we get you back on, we'll call you back on. I'm going to go to Mr. Thomas Troxler in the meantime.
Tom, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Excellent. I'm new with this. This is my first Zoom ever. I was a little surprised that I only got 1 week's notice. That certified letter came about a week ago. So I hurried out around the neighborhood, and I must have knocked on about 160 doors to let the neighbors know of these plans. I met no one who was in favor of these apartments. I found also that many of my neighbors struggle with English as it's their second language. But whenever they did understand what was going in, their eyes would just grow wide and their head would start to shake, and they would, comment on the increased traffic and the problem of the increased traffic in town. Last time, this downzoning was attempted. Seems like it's a race to the bottom from AAA to the nether reaches of the zoning categories. I actually did a little research. I went to the south side of the tracks where the Heritage Garden apartment complex exists, and I staked out the spot where the complex connects with the stairs leading to the platform for the Long Island Railroad Station. I sat there for, I forget how many trains or for how many hours, but anyway, I tallied about 5 pedestrians walking from the garden apartments onto the train platform. During that time, I tallied about 65 cars leaving for work that morning, driving out of the complex. There's 180 units proposed here. Based on what I've seen around the neighborhood, with single family detached housing, many are multifamily homes. I would equate 180 units with 360 cars. Where are they all going to park? How are they going to get onto Suffolk Avenue? Have you ever tried to make a left turn from westbound Suffolk Avenue onto southbound Brentwood Road. It backs right up a couple blocks, and there's cars on both sides of the double yellow just trying to negotiate that intersection. Yeah, I thank Mr. Gonzalez and the lady from the school board for bringing up the other points. I hope you on the planning board did get a chance to read my letter. I'm a little more eloquent on paper. Oh, and yes, I often can see many horses on the horse farm property. It seems viable to me. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and the other members of the planning board for listening. Have a good evening.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Richard Cirillo. Mr. Cirillo?
Hello? Yes, hi. It's actually my husband and myself, Carmen Soriello, and I live on Evergreen Avenue, and cross street is Eastern. And I have to say that I'm very concerned with the traffic as well. And my question for the builders and who I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, for whoever's planning this project, have they ever taken a look at the fact that on Eastern Avenue, in the intersection of Eastern Avenue and Suffolk Avenue, how many times we have had accidents there? I have one of my neighbors across the street from my home, rode his bike. He's in his early 60s, was riding his bike towards Suffolk Avenue to go across by the train station. And he got hit by a car, flew him up in the air. Thank God he did not, die or anything. But what I'm concerned about is, again, like everyone else is stating, you have 180 whatever units that you want to build, and 200 and something parking spaces, and you times that by 2. Now you're talking about 400 cars that can be, that are going to want to park there. And then what's going to happen? They're going to want to park their cars in our neighborhoods, in our street. Now you're causing congestions in, on Eastern, on Evergreen, on Ocean Avenue. The other fact is that a lot of people cut across from Eastern into Evergreen Avenue all the way across to get to Central Islip as well. So, this doesn't make sense to build that there. Way too many units, way too many people that are going to be there. The other fact is that did these people, do their homework and see how this is going to impact our community? School, the traffic again, like someone else stated, the garbage that's in the area, the other apartment buildings that are down the block on Brentwood Road. It's a mess over there. And we try to, call police to give us assistance, and their hands are tied with the garbage and the mess that's going on over there. And these people think that this is a positive for our community. They need to come around here, live around here for a while, and then see, what we deal with every day. I personally am totally opposed to this project. I feel bad for, the people that own this. I think that they can do something better. I think maybe leasing some space to farmers, like this other person mentioned earlier, was a great idea, like they did in the St. Anne's church. They leased some of that property and it's going really well. There's farmers there planting. Do something that's gonna bring value to our community. I think this is gonna be a total nightmare On Evergreen, where I live at right now, you have cars zooming by here all the time. All the time. They cut across, like I said, they come off of Suffolk Avenue towards Eastern and then all the way straight down Evergreen, which brings them all the way down to I think it's Oakland, and out to Suffolk Avenue again, where they can go ahead and cut across without having to deal with that traffic on Suffolk Avenue, because rush hour, forget it. Something that should be 5 minutes from here, to maybe Taco Bell, it's taking you 20 minutes because of the traffic that's in the area. And as relating to the restaurant that they want to put the coffee shop, we just have Dunkin' Donuts just opened up. We have so many different restaurants as it is. We don't need any more, honestly.
Mr. Earl, you have 3 minutes. I'll just ask you to begin wrapping up. Thank you.
Okay, so my biggest concern is that I think this is going to be dangerous for the community. It's not going to be a plus, and I vote strongly no for this project.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm turning to Marcos.
Yes, I'm here. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I, like the rest of the concerned residents on this phone call, am opposed to the project, but I'm going to be opposed to the project for philosophical reasons, and here's why. It's clear that this project has failed to truly engage the community in any kind of meaningful dialogue that would bring something that would be both of value to the developer, allow the current owners to sell the property, and be able to bring a benefit to the community. All throughout the town of Islip, you also see community benefit agreements for large-scale projects that go on within certain hamlets. There's none of that attached to this project as well. You're talking about 17 acres in what is quite possibly some of the most valuable real estate in the hamlet. Where is the exchange with the community in a meaningful way to get something done there? The community is not saying they don't want anything done there. What the community is saying in this airing of grievances, which everyone is hearing, is that they're not being listened to. And maybe if both the sellers and the developers decide to engage the community in a meaningful way, you can get to a point where this is done. Everyone disagrees with the plans. How do you put 300 some or close to 300 parking spaces with only one entrance? That's madness. I mean, not everyone is going to take the train. Okay, so aside from the issues with the design and how it doesn't currently mold within the comprehensive nature of what even the town of Islip has for that plan, for that area, I think that there needs to be some serious dialogue with the community. If you're serious about trying to get something that is going to be attractive for young people, okay, and be a benefit to the community, you're going to have to engage all of these groups. And that includes, residents who want to see the land stay the way it is, so that you can have something that has truly true community buy-in. And with that, I'm happy to yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Jean Lederer.
Okay, I'm right here. Good evening, gentlemen. I've been, along with my husband, a 32-year resident of Brentwood. We've raised our 4 sons here, right along Eastern Avenue. So you could say this is a question of NIMBYism, but I think not. I find it hard to trust this third attempt by the town of Islip to broker a deal to spoil the little green space we have here in Brentwood to keep Long Islanders' aquifer viable for clean drinking water. For years, the town of Islip has turned a blind eye to the raging 30-year onslaught of single-family homes rented out by ruthless absentee landlords into illegal, unsafe, filthy multifamily dwellings. The town of Islip has not only degraded Brentwood, but responsible for disrespecting and causing harm to the lives of refugees seeking asylum in our town. And really, unfortunately, finding that as being the only place that they could find quote unquote livable places on which to find sanctuary. I am really opposed to further housing that would really, in my estimation, is this housing really affordable? Is it really going to add to the quality of life in our town for the people here that are already just not having that quality of life, living in garages, living in basements, living in just standing room only rooms in homes? You really don't know the person who is the lawyer for the community, for the seller, the developer, Brentwood at all. As Mrs. Davidson said, you really don't know our community. You really have not had any dialogue with us. And with that, I'd really just like to leave the remainder of my time to anybody else who'd like to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lederer. Mr. Fritz, I'm going to try you one more time. You're our last speaker. Let's hope we can get you unmuted right now and get you on.
He's trying to use his cell phone, but he's having issues.
Mr. Fritz, I'm still not hearing you, but I'm going to turn to Elvin Fuentes.
Can everybody hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. As everybody has said before, I'm a Central Islip resident. I passed through Brentwood multiple times. This is not feasible. It's the same thing that happened to Wine Bench is going to happen to these apartment complexes. Second Avenue apartment complex is a joke, Hemlock as well. And as a business standpoint of view, this is not a good investment. And it's not just an aesthetic thing, a philosophical thing for the community. This is just not viable. And even as a business point of view, I don't think this will pan out for the developer and their intentions. So nothing that I'll say is something that hasn't been repeated before, and that's really what I just wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Fritz, try one more time with you. You're the last person who has not yet spoken that would like to speak. Any luck getting your microphone working? Not seeing you come live. I am going to close the public portion of this and turn to Mr. Colgan to give us a report. Mr. Colgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This application was originally heard as a planned development district back in 2017. Primary concerns raised at the time were traffic and school impacts. The traffic concerns were adequately addressed as per the town's traffic consultant for that significantly larger application. With regards to the school impacts, many studies have shown that apartments do not generate as many school children as single-family homes. Since that time, the applicant has reduced the number of apartments from 240 to 180, and the retail fast food restaurant from 6,000 square feet to approximately 5,000 square feet. Heights of the buildings do not exceed 3 stories, and additional on-site amenities have been provided. The density of the apartment portion of the site is less than the maximum 12 to the acre. The applicant is proposing to keep the horse farm open as part of the application in order to meet the overall density. Any units above the 9 per acre would need to be set aside as workforce housing. This application could provide a unique opportunity to provide a transit-oriented apartment complex, while at the same time preserving a component of a historic use of the property. However, we did hear many comments from the public tonight, and there were a few who were not able to speak, so the staff would recommend that the board reserve decision tonight, keep the record open for a period of time so that the staff can work on any of those comments with the applicant before bringing this back for a decision.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. To the applicant, there are several questions that were asked that maybe we can go back. I'll go to Mr. Bazell first. If not, I'll come back and ask Mr. Colgan for that. But can we talk about number of children expected from the apartments? And then the amount of, if you know, the amount of revenue, tax revenue that would be generated from that property? You're on mute. There you go.
Okay. I believe my environmental consultant who did all the SEQA review is on. Before deferring to him, I would say generally a few points. Number one, 140 of the units are studios or one bedrooms. Apartments are expected to be tax positive. Not only do apartments, particularly quality apartments, produce much less children than a single family home, there are no accessory apartments. There are no tax abatements such as STAR or otherwise. And in Islip, apartments are taxed at a commercial rate. So they're taxed at a higher rate than single family homes, even though they produce a lot less children. And of course, no children are produced by the commercial portion of the lot or the school or the horse farm. That was looked at in detail. Chick, are you out there?
Yes, I am here.
Do you want to pick up?
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Chick Voorhees. I'm a certified planner and an environmental professional with the firm Nelson Pope and Voorhees. And we've done a number of studies on this site and over the years. And I think what Mr. Colgan was referring to in several cases were prior studies we did in connection with the PDD. So we have studied economic and fiscal impacts, and we do have an updated study that will be submitted to the town to analyze this further in response to the comments that we've heard tonight. But I'll just quickly walk through some of the information in that report. Basically, we did project the economic activity from this project in terms of employment. And it is substantial. It wasn't one of the direct questions, so I won't go into detail. We also determined the existing tax revenue from the property and the potential future tax revenue, as Mr. Buzel indicated, using the type of commercial assessment that would apply to apartments. And our projection is that the project would generate approximately $720,000 in total tax revenue, of which about $520,000 would be, let's just say, allocated to the school district based on the percentage proportions in the tax bill. We also assessed the unit mix and the potential to generate school-age children. This is always very controversial. So we've been following all the current references. There have been studies by the Long Island Housing Partnership, studies by Stony Brook University, studies by Rutgers University, and all of these are factors that demographers use and we use to look to analyze that type of impact. Joe Buzel mentioned it, and it's extremely important that the unit mix really seeks to minimize the number of school-age children. Not that children are bad, but there are potential impacts to the school district that were commented on by the school board representative. So when we analyze the types of units, the fact that there are 80 studio units and 61 bedroom units, Mr. Colgan also commented that those types of units really do generate a very low number of school-age children. The 2-bedroom units also generate low numbers compared to 3 or 4 bedroom type units. So when you look at the unit mix and attribute the factors that are referenced and studied by my office and many others, our projection is that approximately 20 school-age children would result from this project, of which, based on the current proportions in the school district for published information, 1 child would be expected to attend private schools. So that's approximately 19 children distributed over the grade levels of, the classrooms within the district. We did look at that compared to the revenue potential based on the cost to educate children. And we actually break it down based on special ed costs as well as general education costs. Because there's a substantial increase based on special ed education students. And so again, based on published data, we're able to project from current conditions, how many special ed students, how many general ed students. And based on that, the cost to educate the children from the project, from the community, would be about $250,000. And as I said, the total revenue was about $520,000, leaving $270,000 in surplus or revenue above the cost to educate. So that summarizes the basic fiscal and economic report that we will be submitting to town planning for review. And I believe it supports what Mr. Gazelle said and Mr. Colgan's comments based on review of other previous projects and the reduction in density and unit mix on this project. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. So that would be, I think the current tax on the property is 80K, so it's 720 less the 80, or you've already accounted for that?
No, it's the total tax revenue based on the proposed community.
Okay, so that would be the new number minus that number. Okay. Mr. Bazell, the other question that came up quite a bit, is traffic, number of cars, car accident data. Can you speak to some of that from your traffic report? Traffic study, you're muted.
Mr. Chairman, I think that once Joe comes on, he'll probably defer to me as well. As I said, we have done a number of studies, and for the prior project, there was a very detailed expanded environmental assessment form. So I'll just get two questions out of the way that I heard. There are no wetlands on the property, and there is extensive environmental data and information available. That, based on tonight's hearing, I would seek to update all of that information so that you have current information for the proposed project. That being said, part of that documentation includes a traffic study that was prepared by Nelson and Pope, licensed professional engineers with tremendous experience in performing traffic studies. I am not a traffic engineer. I have studied transportation planning, but I am certainly capable of summarizing the study. And I think it helps in this environment using Zoom to just have, consolidate the number of speakers. This will also be submitted, and I did note Mr. Colgan's comment that the traffic from the prior project was addressed to the satisfaction of the reviewer in the town. So again, it is based on prior work that was done. In fact, the traffic study addresses 240 units, which was the prior project. So it's overestimating the density by 60 units. That has not been updated because we just felt that a much more conservative study was adequate for the purpose of addressing the new project. And so that study looks at the existing roadway conditions. There is extensive analysis of accident history. And the person that commented on the accident at Eastern, that is in the records. There were 11 accidents within the period of record at Eastern, and there were no fatalities. There were 11 injuries. And again, we have all of that data and information. I don't want to drill down too deep unless there's a specific question, but that information has been compiled. We also—
Can you speak to what the current traffic count is in and out of there and what the new numbers would be if this project were approved?
Yes, we have driveway counts. We have trip generation from the 240 unit project. And those have been compiled and basically superimposed on the existing counts on the roadway to determine the level of service. So the proposed project would have a total of, based on 240 units, 60 more than what's proposed. would have 260 trips in and out, 95 trips entering, 165 trips exiting during the AM peak hour weekday period. The PM traffic is 248 trips with 148 entering the site and 100 leaving the site. And we also have Saturday counts, which are 295 total, 165 trips entering the site and 160 trips exiting the site. We superimpose that on multiple intersections along Suffolk Avenue from Route 111 to the east to Washington Avenue, Brentwood Road to the west, and determine the level of service at each of those intersections. The information will speak for itself, and I believe that Mr. Colgan is familiar with it, but it basically shows that there is no decrease in the level of service of the intersections. There were some minor signal timing adjustments needed at several of the intersections, but for the most part, all intersections were at level C with some D, LOS. However, those would be D conditions either currently or under the future year without the build of the project. So our traffic report for a greater number of units shows that the project will not significantly impact the existing roadway system. That's not to say that there aren't delays.
How many
Yes, sir.
exits did you say in the morning? And what is the morning peak hour?
7 to 9 a.m.
And how many did you say would be exiting from 7 to 9 a.m.?
Have to shuffle back. 165.
I mean, to me, that seems like a significant number to add on to Suffolk Avenue in a 2-hour period. And again, you're giving us those numbers, but I also heard earlier this would be transit oriented, a lot of people possibly walking across the street. So that accounts for both people, 165 cars. Again, it'll go down modestly based on the reduction in units, but 165 cars pulling out of there in addition to the people walking across the street, or are we not accounting for people now walking across to the train station?
No, it typically, we take a conservative approach and don't look to take credits, as you might call them, for that scenario. This is the trip generation from the project based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers, a trip generation manual. So it is accurate. It is a large number that is based on 240 units, not 180. And when that traffic was superimposed on the roadway system using the highway capacity manual methods and synchro models, which analyze all of these intersections and each individual movement based on seconds of delay, the seconds of delay determine the level of service, and there's no change when this traffic is superimposed on the roadways. That will, of course, be submitted, and I believe it's in the files of the planning office at this time, because it's the same report that was updated in 2019 for the higher density project.
What, I don't know if you have, what are the current statistics for peak hours of cars coming in and out of there, or cars exiting there or going there in the morning hours? Do we have current statistics for what property?
We do, because you have to count the trips at each movement of every intersection in order to determine the existing level of service. And I'm just trying to, in the accident portion, I think I can get to it. Bear with me. A little complicated, but I might actually have to look at the diagrams.
If you want to get that, I'll come back to you. I guess, Mr. Brazell, if you want to, can you speak to the question about affordability, affordable units in there? Is that you, Mr. Brazell, while Mr. Voorhees is looking up the information that I asked for? You're on mute again. Yeah. There you go.
All right, there is an affordable component. We've agreed to it. It is, as Mr. Colgan indicated earlier. So we have a workforce housing component. I think it's 20%.
20% is what you do, okay, but the code requires.
But we are proposing what the code requires. That's correct.
I want to come back to that environmental. I know, Mr. Voorhees, you mentioned somewhat. I don't know if any of the environmental impacts you wanted to speak to. Also, that was raised by a few people in terms of the environment there. Mr. Voorhees, you're muted now.
Thank you. I think that Mr. Buzel covered a lot of material in his opening presentation about the design of the project and how that relates to the surroundings, how the retention of the 5 acres of the riding facility and the high quality design. I believe you have some architectural information. Those are the, typical, let's say, human resource type of impacts. In terms of environmental impacts, the project will be sewered. It will have public water. The depth to groundwater is adequate for stormwater drainage, and we have our engineer on this call who can speak to that. There are no wetlands on the property. So it's really, I think that originally and right at the opening, Mr. Colgan indicated that the primary issues had been school children, tax revenue, and traffic. I don't feel that there's any other significant adverse environmental impacts that need to be looked at. However, we would appreciate the opportunity to submit this much more detailed information regarding traffic and tax generation and school children.
Were you able to find the trip generation out of that current use of the property?
Yes, I believe, do we have, could you just check if Osmond Barry is on?
I don't remember seeing him, but I'll take a look.
He may have a consolidated table because I'm looking at the actual diagrams of each intersection, and that would go on for all night.
I don't see him on, so what I'm gonna do is, while maybe on your end, you could track him down and take a look there, and I will turn to my fellow board members for some questions, and then I'll maybe come back to you on that, if you can get that information.
Yes.
Further questions from the board? Maybe I won't turn to the fellow board members for questions.
So if we're going to come back to that, I can tell you that figure 6 of the traffic study shows the intersections and actually has a breakdown of the movements of cars, which ones are through traffic, left-hand turns, and right-hand turns. And so there are 12 numbers for each intersection. So the question is rather complicated when you ask what the existing traffic numbers are. The counts that we take on the roadway that measure the movements pick up any activity with respect to the horse farm because it's an existing operation. And so you really have to look at all of these multiple movements of cars that were counted in each of the intersections.
I think Barry has joined you also.
Osmond has joined us, and he may be able to explain this a little bit further, but it is a very complicated question that will be covered in the traffic study. Osmond, have they let you in?
Am I in?
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay.
I don't know if you heard the question earlier. I'm really trying to, we're saying there's a minimal traffic impact. I'm really trying to look at the impact of the amount of trips generated out of the property and into the property now versus what you found your study would increase the trip generation to.
I don't have the traffic study in front of me, but what Chick is saying, we counted tons coming in and out of the driveway. So if the traffic study, Chick, can you tell how many cars are coming out of that driveway right now in the existing conditions? Based on the figure.
Yeah, we have counts at Fulton Street and we have counts at Washington. And because there's no, I don't know if we have actual driveway counts for the horse farm because that would be picked up at the nearest intersections, east and west.
Yeah, because
Yes, go ahead, Osmond.
well, because there's no driveway, there's no existing counts at the driveway. So whatever we have in the build condition that is coming out of the driveway is the traffic from the project. So if you look at the site traffic figure, whatever movement you have coming from the driveway opposite the train station entrance, whatever is coming in and out, left and right, or northbound right, southbound left, those are the trip generation for the project.
Right, so what I think, obviously you have to update your traffic study anyway. One of the things I'd like to see, rather than debate this tonight, when you update the traffic study, I think one of the things you should really look at, because you can actually do a physical count or put something there to realize what the current traffic generation out of that particular site is, not at the intersections, because we're not sure if we're capturing other movements at the intersections from other places. What I'd like to see as part of that study, when you revise it, is what the current traffic is in and out of that site, to see what, during the peak hours, not.
That is coming out of the site?
Correct, going into.
That's coming out of the site right now?
Yes.
Does the site have an existing driveway?
Well, people are going to the horse farm, right? Where are they, how are they using the horse farm?
It would just be related.
Yeah, well, basically the previous study we did.
Say that, I didn't hear you. Say again.
So let me just say that it would just be related to the horse farm, and traffic counts are taken during peak hours. So if there's activity there at 7 to 9 in the morning, we pick it up. Or if there's activity at 4 to 6 in the afternoon, we would pick it up. But the volume is very low, and it is whatever cars are entering and exiting that site are already on Suffolk Avenue and are picked up at the Fulton Street counts to the east and the Washington Avenue Brentwood Road counts to the west. So we don't have a breakdown of those counts, but they are very small and they're picked up at the other intersections. If you would like that, we can do that.
If you want to say this small, I'm certainly willing to accept that the increased peak hour trips out of there are going to be 165. That is the increase. Minus when you do the modification for the number of units. That'll be
Our study we did, our previous study we did assumed 0. We did a conservative analysis assuming the existing condition is 0. So everything we have at the intersection, we assume is new from the proposed project. So that is a conservative analysis because we did not take any credit for whatever was going in and out of the horse farm during the time we did the study. However, if we want to update the study now, we're going to do new trip generation that will show the current project. That I can give you now. If you want me to tell you how many cars that are going to go in and out of the site for the new project, I can do that right now and give it to you.
I would just suggest if you're going to have to do the study over anyway to match your current numbers, that you include that in there. If you want to peg it at 0, it's your choice to peg it at 0. I mean, it's your benefit to show something if there is a difference. If it's de minimis, then leave it the way it is. But, you know, one of the problems on Suffolk Avenue is traffic. One of the things that was raised certainly by a lot of the residents tonight, in addition to the other things they spoke about, from the environment to tax revenue, to number of school children, to the other developments in the area that have become unsightly and not fitting of the community, to the I'm missing a couple of the affordability issues and everything else, was traffic and how traffic would impact the area. So I look forward to seeing the revised report from you and seeing what that states.
Very good. Thank you.
I don't want to get to the debate on it tonight. Mr. Frugier, I see you mic
Yeah,
up.
Mr. Chairman, for the purpose of the updated traffic impact study, I think it would be helpful not only to take a look at what the existing traffic counts are existing right now coming out of basically a very underutilized horse farm. We probably should compare the potential trip generation of an as-of-right use to really evaluate what the potential trip generation is from an existing condition. Because let's say this application is denied, that horse farm remains, it could come back, trip generation could increase. So we really have to compare apples to apples. So in studying it, I would study existing conditions under current zoning and compare that to the proposed conditions that you're requesting this evening.
And thank you, Mr. Rudra. That would be good to have a comparison
Do
for
that.
those that are permitted as of right. And the other thing that just was raised that I don't know that was done, was there any outreach meetings again with the community itself? Was there any one-on-one meetings to discuss? I think that was raised by, his name was Marcos, I don't have last name, but something that was raised. Often large projects, there was outreach to the community with sit-downs and meetings.
We did have a number of meetings earlier in the application process. As indicated, this is our second hearing. We've been around for a while. We did meet with a number of people, including then Legislator Martinez, and the feedback we had was good.
Okay, well, certainly there might be some opinion changes on the project itself, but I just wanted to ask if you had done that. Those are all the questions that I have as of right now. I think there are some things that need to be clarified and resubmitted for us to review in their entirety. Is there anything else from members of the board that they want to ask? Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Moriarty.
Thank you. Mr. Bazell, you mentioned in your comments that sewers were not an issue and that you were hooking up to an existing sewer or main force pipe. Give me some more information about that.
A pipe is going to be run from the old Entenmann's plant up to this particular site. If my site engineer, Raul Cotilla, is out there, he could fill you in a little more specifically than I could.
Okay.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the board. Raul Cotilla from D&B Engineers, Woodbury, New York. The plan right now is to construct a pump station on site, which would transmit the sanitary sewer from the project to the existing Entenmann's facility. We have been in talks with the new owners of the Entenmann's facility to have them accept our sanitary flow. Those talks are ongoing right now.
So just so I understand, you're going to run a pipe then from your property in Knoll Farm up to the Entenmann's property on Fifth Avenue in North Bay Shore. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're gonna run it along public roadway?
Yes.
Just seems like a huge undertaking, quite frankly.
It is.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I don't want to make light of the project. It is a large undertaking.
Right.
Thank you. Any further questions from board members? Giselle, would you like to add anything further?
No, I think we're good at this point. We'll follow up with the planning department.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Mr. Moriarty, thank you.
I'd like to make a motion that we close the hearing this evening and that we reserve decision.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to close the public hearing and reserve decision. It looks like Mr. Bruno is seconding that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstentions were reserved. Thank you. Anybody who was not able to be heard, you certainly submit anything in writing. As also Mr. Gonzalez said, anybody who was unable to get on this evening, submit it in writing. It will be circulated to all of the board members to review. Thank you all again. I'm going to go to item number 9 on the agenda, which is major subdivision bond extension, west side of Suffolk Lane. I'm sorry, I skipped Fox Run Estates, East Islip, MS 2006-001, west side of Suffolk Lane, approximately 620 feet south of Haiti Place, East Islip. Applicant requests the acceptance of a continuation certificate for bond number B100278830 in connection with this major subdivision. Is the applicant here, or am I going right to Mr.?
Right to staff report.
Go ahead, Mr. Gonzalez. I'm just going to step away and plug my computer before it dies.
Sure. This application was last heard on August 16th, 2018, where the board granted modifications to the declaration of covenants to allow the removal of the cul-de-sac island, removal of the split rail fence bordering the required natural areas, and removal of the existing structure on lot 6, subject to additional landscaping modifications at the direction of the Department of Planning and Development. Since that time, building permits have been steadily issued and construction has been underway for all the involved lots. Per the engineering inspectors and the town engineer, the new road must now wait until the end of the summer of 2021 for a final inspection to be conducted and signed off before that road can be dedicated to the town. In light of that requirement, the applicant has submitted a continuation certificate for bond number B100278830 for the same amount of $407,861, which shall run until July 21st, 2021. Based on the above, staff recommends the board accept this continuation certificate, subject to the attached final resolution, which after the hearing will be updated to tonight's date and motions.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Any questions for Mr. Gonzalez? Not seeing any. Is there a motion?
Chairman,
Mr.
I'd
Brown.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the certificate. The bond is D100-27830 in the amount of $407,861, subject to the conditions.
There's a motion by Mr. Brown to accept the certificate as the bond number he read out with the amount he stated on the record. Is there a second to that? A lot of hands went up there. Mr. Mattermore won it again. Second by Mr. Mattermore. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it's granted. Thank you. It's accepted, I should say. Item 10 on the agenda, major subdivision bond extension, Dartmouth Estates, East Islip, MS 2006-008, east side of Meadow Farm Road, 704 feet south of Dock Road, and the southerly terminus of Blackmore Lane, East Islip. Staff requests the acceptance of updated surety, cash bond, and inspection fee figures in connection with this previously approved major subdivision. No applicant, I'm taking it. I'm going right to Mr. Gonzalez again.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Let me just bring up the staff report here. Okay. This application was last heard on January 5th, 2012. The board granted a modification of the final resolution to eliminate the requirement to preserve the historic structure on Lot 3 and reauthorize the cluster design, subject to a historic marker on site, use of tribute architecture for the new dwellings, and the repair/renovation equal to $50,000 to Brookwood Hall in East Islip prior to issuance of any CO. The property has now changed hands, with no former member being associated with the new entity. The new sole owner, Mike Maffetone, who will also be the general contractor for the development, purchased all the lots earlier this year under 4 different corporations: MADB Mia Model Corp, MADB Model 1 Corp, MADB Max Model Corp, and MADB Model 2 Corp. In light of 8 years passing since the last action, staff felt it necessary to update the old bond figures, which were last used in 2012. The county engineer is currently reviewing the updated bond figures. The amount has been left as to be determined on the final resolution. They will, however, increase compared to the previous figures. The last numbers on the old resolution were about a $154,000 surety bond, and now that's going up by approximately an additional $140,000. And the cash bond and inspection fees will increase, same percentage wise. So all those figures are going up to the current standards. The applicant will be responsible to submit a near surety bond, cash bond, and basically the difference between the prior inspection fee and the new inspection fee amount. The previous surety bond and cash bond will be released to the prior owner subsequent to receiving the new funds. The new owner has already applied for 2 building permits and is in the process of having those issued soon. After this meeting would be resolved on this application. Based on this, staff recommends the following, subject to the attached final resolution, which will be updated to tonight's date and motions: the release of the prior surety and cash bond to the prior owner, and the submittal of a new surety bond, cash bond, and the additional money for the inspection fees by the new owner.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Any questions for Mr. Gonzalez? Not seeing any, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Brown?
Yes, I'd like to grant, subject to the conditions that were stated by Mr. Gonzalez.
There's a motion to grant, subject to the conditions stated by Mr. Gonzalez. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a second by Mr. Frugiero. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it's granted. Item 11 on the agenda, and site plan modification, decision item, Anthony Avellino, SP 2020-027, west side of MJ Boulevard, Brentwood, 80 MJ Boulevard. Applicant seeks a parking relaxation, landscape and relaxation for overhead doors facing a street. Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Amy Burbot and Anthony Avellino on behalf of the applicant.
Go ahead when you're ready.
We have in front of the planning department the site plan application for the construction or reconstruction of a solid waste management transfer facility out at 80 MJ Boulevard. And as part of that application, we need a approval for relaxations on 3 items. The parking relaxation, the landscaping relaxation, and an overhead doors facing the street relaxation. In the I don't know if any of the board members might remember, but there was a previous facility on this exact footprint a number of years ago. It's been gone for about 6 years. The applicant intends to reconstruct the facility. This is going to be a direct rail-served transfer facility. As such, all of the loading activities for the transfer activities take place within the building, which is why the overhead doors remain facing the street. We don't have an option of putting the delivery doors for the construction and demolition debris trailers on anywhere else because the rail track is on the rear of the property and the rail track will enter the building. This site, having been originally constructed as a transfer station back in 2003, most of the landscaping has been put in. We'll be improving it and replanting some things, but point being that the overhead doors are not really visible from the street because of the mature plantings in the right-of-way, in the 20-foot right-of-way. As to the parking relaxation, this is a facility that at best will employ 10 people at a maximum shift time. And as I think the board can appreciate, we'll have very few visitors. So we absolutely are not in need of the parking allocations under the ordinances. The entire office area for the facility is less than 1,200 square feet. So that's the parking relaxation. Anthony, I'll defer on the landscaping relaxation. What is it that we need?
So we are providing 23,805 square feet. The area required was 30,492 or 20% of the property. We are providing 15.61%, which is approximately 1,000 square foot over the relaxation requirements.
And as I think the board can see from the plans, if you reference the site plan, we've landscaped every possible area that we can that's not in use for either the truck queuing, access to the building, et cetera, or parking.
On that topic, if I can just ask you, if you're saying that 10 spots is the most you're going to need for any given shift, any reason not to land bank some of those spots and put more landscaping there?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. You were asking if 10 spots was the maximum we were going to need?
Right. From what you were saying, you'd have 10 on any given shift is what you would have there. Is there any reason you have quite a few parking spots there not to land bank some of them and
No, our intent is to land bank quite a few of them, but more of them, it's not that we're limiting the parking to around the building. I mean, we probably will end up with, if you look at the south border of the property, which is the way this plan is, attitude is, it's on your left. We'll probably still be using some of those parking spots as well as the ones near the scale house, which is the only place there's an office building. But most of them, like the parking up near the south side of the building, outside that one loading area, that'll end up being land banked. There'll be quite a bit of it that'll be land banked. Oh, thank you. Quite a bit of it that'll be land banked.
So that doesn't currently calculate into your landscaping then?
I'm
Right.
sorry, it doesn't currently.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you on that.
Mm-hmm.
Anything further you wanted to present before I went to the staff report?
No, other than we'll obviously answer any questions the board has.
Okay, so I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan to give us a staff report, and then we'll come back for some questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property is currently zoned Industrial 1 District. It was formerly used as a waste transfer station, which was destroyed by fire in 2013. In 2015, an application was submitted and approved to rezone the parcel to Industrial 2 District in order to permit a scrap metal processing facility. This approval ended in litigation, and a settlement was reached to revert the zoning back to Industrial 1 District. A parking relaxation, landscaping relaxation, and a relaxation to allow overhead doors to face MJ Boulevard are all required to develop this property as proposed. These relaxations were also required for the original application for the prior waste transfer station and for the proposal for the scrap metal processing facility, and both are granted. Planning staff believes that the site will have adequate parking to accommodate the use. The landscaping, most of which is existing, provides a 20-foot area of landscaping along MJ Boulevard. The trees there are mature and help screen the property from view. There's also a fence behind the landscaping that further obscures the view into the site. The overhead doors are facing the street, but there is ample room to allow for truck turning movements on site. Due to the fact that the overhead doors existed in this location and the applicant's already building on the same foundation, this appears reasonable as well. The staff would recommend that the board approve the requested relaxations.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. Questions from the board? Not seeing any. Question. Amy, I apologize, I don't know your last name, but.
It's Burbott, B-U-R-B-O-T-T. Go ahead.
Just a question for you, and this might be a county health or a DEC question, but can you speak to rodent control and odor containment?
I didn't quite make out the question, Mr. Chairman. Can you repeat it?
Sure. It may be DEC and it may be county health questions, but can you speak to odor containment as well as rodent control?
Yes, both of which have been addressed, as you point out, with respect to our seeker application. The New York State DEC is taking lead agency on that application.
Right.
But this transfer station has been designed to accept primarily pre-processed construction and demolition debris. Not less than 80% of the throughput of the facility is going to be C&D debris that's been tipped at other permitted transfer stations, processed, and put into trailers. So it's brought here to literally just put it on the floor and load it into rail cars. And we're taking advantage of the shipping location of the proximity of the rail. There is a component of the transfer station application in front of the DEC that includes baled municipal solid waste, but it is also MSW, which has been baled and containerized in accordance with rail tariff standards. That means that the facility will only accept pre-processed baled MSW, and it's never tipped in the building. It is brought to the facility on flatbeds. It is loaded directly from the flatbed into rail cars that are sealed, or loaded into intermodal containers, which are also sealed. So, with respect to odors, there should be none, because the bulk of the material that's being put through the facility is C&D debris, and what little MSW is being put through is already packaged, pre-processed and baled, and as I said, wrapped or containerized in accordance with rail tariff requirements. So this facility, unlike the previous facility that was there, is going to have no tipping of loose MSW that could generate odors. As to rodent control, doesn't matter, to be candid, how aggressive you are. Usually there are potential issues with some rodents, but those are going to be controlled by extermination as per the plan filed with the DEC.
Thank you. I think it's important to put that on the record, so I appreciate that. And the last thing is for trucks or things that may be dropping off at the facility, there is sufficient on-site room for the trucks that'll be there?
Yes, in fact, we've we've produced that data for the DEC. We've copied the town on it, but there's more than adequate turning radius for tractor trailers to come through. As Sean mentioned, this is the reconstruction of the facility that was there. The scales are still in place. All of the turning radiuses and everything that were originally approved by the town remain in place. There's more than adequate turning radius for tractor trailers. There's going to be 4 doors, as you may be able to see from the plan, facing MJ Boulevard, which is where the tipping will take place. But yes, there's more than adequate turning radius for not only the tractor trailers, but staging to assure that there's never staging of any kind of vehicles on MJ Boulevard.
Great, thanks. My question there. Any further questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant?
No.
Okay, not seeing any. I'm going to ask if there's a motion. Mr. Moriarty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I would move that we grant the application as presented, subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you. The motion by Mr. Moriarty to grant the application subject to the conditions. Mr. Brown looks like is seconding that. Mr. Fruit was turned off his mute, so he was about to second it, but we'll give it to Mr. Brown this time. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it's approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Go to item number 12 on the agenda, site plan modification decision item, J. Nazaro LP PB 2020-009, south side of Main Street, State Route 27A, west side of Degnan Boulevard, Bayshore. Applicant requests a buffer and park and relaxation in association with development of a medical office. Good evening to the applicant.
Yes, hello. Mr. Friedman, Steve Bertolino, 130 West Main Street, East Islip, New York. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman. I know this is a decisional hearing, but just to recap, this is an assemblage of approximately 2 acres on the corner of Degnan Boulevard and Main Street, Montauk Highway in Islip. Proposal is for a 25,200 square foot medical office building, looking for a small parking relaxation from 170 parking spots required to 161. We need a relaxation on the buffer. And we also have a variance that will be needed for an expansion of a less restrictive zone into a more restrictive zone because of the split zoning of the parcels. I don't want to belabor the point on the application itself. I don't believe that when we were heard on June 3rd that there was any community opposition. I don't believe the board had any pressing questions, and I don't believe the planning department had anything pressing. That being said, to keep it short and sweet, we're here again tonight to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you. Mr. Bertolino, I had one question that evening, but I'm going to go to Mr. Colgan for his report, and maybe between him and yourself, the question will be answered for me that I had that evening. So I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan, and then we'll come back for questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Colgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application was previously heard at the June 3rd hearing. No significant issues were raised at that time. Given that the applicant will be developing a long vacant site utilizing Business Street property with a less intense use, and will be utilizing superior plantings to mitigate the smaller buffer, the staff would recommend that the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions. The chairman had mentioned possibly closing or reconfiguring the southern curb cut. Staff did review that with both traffic safety and the Division of Engineering. They didn't raise any formal objections to the curb cut, but they didn't see any reasons why it could not become an exit only or closed altogether or consolidated into a single curb cut, either with the middle aisle or the aisle furthest north towards Main Street. So with that being said, the staff would leave it up to the board as to how they'd want to determine the fate of that curb cut.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. So I guess to Mr. Bertolino, just on that one question, I think that was the only question really. I think it's a good project. I think it goes well in the area. I think it'll look well and it'll clean up a lot of what is a mess over there now.
Yeah, just give me 1 second. Just texting Jim Nazaro to see what he thinks about that. In any event, I do recall this concern that southerly curb cut. There's that one house on the east side of Denyon, and there was some discussion about whether or not there would be any issue with that. I would defer to the engineers on our end to see. It looks like, as I'm looking at the site plan now, it looks like we would be able to consolidate those two curb cuts into that center aisle, as Mr. Colgan pointed out. I don't know how that would impact the actual flow of traffic on site, but I don't anticipate it would be a problem. I'm sure if that was the only condition that the board had, we would do everything possible to make that work.
Yeah, and the only reason I reasoned, again, it's hard to tell from this, but if the exit lane is not directly at that one house, then this is a moot point. We don't have to discuss it. It was hard for me to tell on the what was submitted. I just couldn't make it out. I walked over there, but I didn't bring my measuring tape to get the actual footage from the property before. But it's a good project. I'd be happy to approve it, subject to that being resolved with the planning staff. If you're, from what you said, willing to at least consider it. That was my only issue with it.
And absolutely, I think that's a fair compromise, subject to, but not conditioned upon working with the planning staff. And absolutely, I think you all know Mr. Nazaro, certainly willing to, accommodate any reasonable changes that need to be made to make the project happen. Jim, I see you're on site now. What do you have to say about that?
That's fine.
Okay. Any further questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your time and consideration.
Thank you. That being said, is there a motion? Mr. Matamore, go ahead. You're taking the lead tonight. Extra points for you.
I move to grant the application subject to that curb cut being worked out between Mr. Nazaro, his attorneys, and with the planning staff, which I'm sure can be done.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Matamore to grant the application subject to the curb cut issue being resolved between planning staff and Mr. Bertolino. Is there a second? By Mr. Bruno. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it's granted. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 13 on the agenda, Town Board Application Recommendation Item, Rover 2014 LLC, CZ 2016-046, east side of Crooked Hill Road, approximately 2,000 feet south of Route 495, Brentwood 801 Crooked Hill Road. Applicant seeks a modification of deed, covenants, and restrictions associated with TC 3674 in order to use the property as a lodging house instead of a hotel. Site plan modifications are also required as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant. Brown, are you taking the lead on this?
Yes, I am. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, go ahead.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the planning board, Keith Brown, Brown Roman LLP, located at 538 Broad Hollow Road, Suite 301 West, Millville, New York, 11747. First off, thanks for providing the opportunity to present Rover 2014 and Family Service League's application to amend the CNRs on the property from a hotel to a lodging house use and related improvements. As you may recall, this is a follow-up to the January 25th, 2017 Planning Board hearing regarding the application. And since your concerns regarding the Family Service League's use of the property. Most recently, on March 4th of this year, April 17th of this year, June 15th of this year, and July 14th of this year, we submitted lengthy and informative submissions to the board for incorporation into the record. Through these written submissions, we respectfully request the town planning board to grant the application in its entirety and send a positive recommendation to the town board so that the Family Service League can continue to do the essential and selfless work for the neediest of Long Islanders. Just by way of background, because there were several members of the board that were not on the board when this application was originally heard. I just want to provide a little recap, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Family Service League is the sole tenant on the property. And they took over from the Long Island Women's Empowerment Network in March of 2016 and have worked diligently from that time to present and correct any and all issues created by the Long Island Women's Empowerment Network. Family Service League has nearly a 90-year history of providing a safety net for those disadvantaged on Long Island. Their mission is to help individuals, children, and families to mobilize their strengths and improve the qualities of their lives at home, in the workplace, and in the community. Family Service League operates approximately 22 facilities offering these services across Long Island. The current census of the facility is 317 individuals, consisting of 87 families of 109 adults and 208 children. 141 of the children are of school age, with over 50% enrolled in the Brentwood School District and 18% enrolled within other school districts in the town of Islip. This facility, make no mistake, allows a Family Service League to do God's work, to better care for and help its adult clients build a better life for themselves and ultimately become self-sufficient. At the same time, Family Service League provides the necessary care, education, and after-school needs to the children of its adult clients to better assist them with the goal of lifting their entire family out of poverty. Now, from a zoning perspective, the site is uniquely situated to allow Family Service League to do what it does best. The former Wingate Inn is a 5-story building that's in very good condition, has good site circulation and ample parking for the use. The site is also ideally located in that the surrounding properties are not an impediment to the use. To the north is a soil and mulch yard, followed by industrial uses, mechanics office, storage facility, and a nursery. To the south and east is the Saginaw Coast Parkway, followed by the Suffolk County Community College and New York State Trooper Police Barracks. To the west is the former Pilgrim State Psychiatric Hospital. As such, the property is remote and private, and there's little to no risk of disturbing any residents. The applicant is dedicated to being a good citizen in the community. Since the Family Service League has assumed responsibility of the site in March of 2016, it has continued to decrease its reliance on government services such as town police, fire, and ambulance services, while increasing the numbers of residents securing permanent housing. As outlined in our June 15th, 2020 submission, the Family Service League provides significant enrichment services to its residents, including on-site case management services, housing relocation services, mental health services, breastfeeding resources with Northwell Health, education and career advancement, adult and student mentorship programs, art therapy, book club, dental services, food pantry, hygiene products, emergency clothing, Boy and Girl Scout programs on site, financial literacy for parents, and writing workshops, to name a few. The residents are also a boon to local businesses, shopping at the stores in the Comex South Shopping Center and other local businesses by utilizing Family Service League's reliable and efficient transportation services. Indeed, this facility allows Family Service League to take advantage of economies of scale that would otherwise not be possible if each family was living elsewhere on their own in a single-family home. For instance, were Family Service League not able to use the facility for these services, each family would have to be provided transportation from the facility to the location of the service for each and every service for each individual child. Same would add unnecessary cost and result in more vehicle traffic on the roads and more air pollution. Instead, Family Service League provides all of these services under one roof at tremendous cost savings to the taxpayer and with greater efficiency to its clients. As described in our June 15th correspondence, with the modification of the CNRs and the site improvements proposed herein, the Family Service League can do more by applying for a Tier 2 certification from New York State and provide on-site meals. In addition to the existing shuttle program used by Family Service League, the in-house program will reduce foot and vehicular traffic on neighboring roads, including Crooked Hill Road, and will continue Family Service League's one-roof approach by providing services. Moreover, As we indicated in our June 15th correspondence and supplemented here, Family Service League has a tremendous success record. They've helped place over 187 families into secure permanent housing and move out of the facility in the last 4 years alone. Family Service League has reduced its dependence on fire, police, and ambulance services. Just statistically, I just want to give you some of them. In 2018, there were 87 911 calls. In 2020, only 12. In 2018, there were 9 fire department emergencies. In 2020, none. In 2015, there were 169 911 calls. In 2020, 22. Family Service League took the following action to address these issues. First, medical transport. They entered into a contract with Hunter EMS to provide ambulance and related services for non-life threatening emergencies. Furthermore, Family Service League employs a driver and 9 client advocates to drive residents to urgent care facilities and local hospitals as needed. Fire prevention. Family Service League assigns client advocates to each floor of the facility to prevent smoking in the rooms and monitor for proper microwave use. Family Service League conducts bi-weekly surprise room inspections for prohibited items and safety compliance. Fire and safety issues are addressed by removing potentially hazardous objects and issuing violations to the resident. If a resident receives numerous violations, they are transferred to a different facility. Family Service League also installs stronger safety covers to its fire alarms, which has reduced the frequency of false alarms. Conflict mitigation. Family Service League's on-site supervisors and contracted security service, Titan Security Group, educate residents into in-house dispute resolution with Family Services on-site resources, instead of contacting the Suffolk County Police Department. In instances that the police assistance is needed, but not emergently, Family Service League staff and Titan are directed to utilize Suffolk County's non-emergency phone number and teleservice unit. About the modification of the CNRs. The CNRs were placed on the property in connection with the 1989 change of zone from Industrial 1 to General Service E. Paragraph 24 of the CNRs restricts the property to a hotel only. General Service E permits a lodging house as of right. Pursuant to RPAPL Section 1915, a modification of CNRs is appropriate because here there is a subsequent change of circumstances and a hotel use is not sustainable in this location. There's no destination nearby to attract leisure travelers, and there's no businesses to attract business travelers. As noted above, the facility is not a drain on government emergency services. Specifically, I just wanted to take a few moments and address some items that were raised by the board in the past few months, planning staff and the board in the past few months, and supplement our written submissions. With regard to pedestrian traffic on Crooked Hill Road, as outlined in our June 15th and July 14th submissions, Family Service League believes that providing reliable transportation is essential to ensuring the safety and well-being of its clients and provides on-demand transportation 15 hours per day from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. Family Service League advertises its transportation options in conspicuous locations throughout the facility and asks clients directly if they would like transportation prior to signing out of the facility. On a daily basis, approximately 10 to 15 families utilize these shuttles. From 8 to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday, that's 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday, Family Service League operates shuttle buses from the facility to local supermarkets, laundromats, urgent care centers, clinics, libraries, courts, housing appointments, and other agency appointments. From 2 p.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week, Family Service League's 9 client advocates provide additional on-demand transportation services. The Family Service League maintains a fleet of 2 vans and 1 car and has car seats for younger clients. Throughout the facility, the Family Service League posts signs in prominent locations informing clients of available off-site transportation. And finally, when residents sign out of the facility, Family Service League staff again offers them rides. Many of the trips provided by the Family Service League are to local grocery stores and fast food restaurants. If the application is granted, it will allow Family Service League to apply for Tier 2 certification from New York State and allow the Family Service League to provide on-site food services and further reduce foot and pedestrian traffic on Crooked Hill Road. In addition, it should be noted that both the Suffolk County DPW and New York State DOT are both planning public work projects near the property. Suffolk County is planning to widen Crooked Hill Road near the property with new sidewalks and handicap ramps. On July 14th of this year, we provided the board with a copy of the proposed Suffolk County DPW plans for Crooked Hill Road. While the New York State DOT is planning to reconstruct the ramps at the intersection of the LIE and Crooked Hill Road, currently scheduled to begin in spring of this year. As of today, we place calls to both agencies and can represent that the plans have not been finalized, nor is there a proposed start date for these improvements. I just, with respect to any building permits for interior alterations, we have applied with the town building permit, building department for these improvements, and revised plans were submitted on June 19th of this year and resubmitted on June 22nd. We were recently advised by the town building department that they signed off on the revised plans with the exception of a few minor issues which Family Service League and H2M, our project engineer, are addressing. However, we cannot obtain a BP for this work until these CNRs are amended. So with that, to the extent the board has any other questions about the facility, on the call with me today and prepared to speak in support of the application are Mr. Robert Creighton, Chairman of the Family Service League Board of Directors, Ms. Karen Borstein, CEO and President of the Family Service League, and Valerie Chamberlain, Assistant Vice President for the Family Service League. And finally, Mr. Ken Geringer of H2M, Architects and Engineers, our design professional. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I have just two questions for you before I go to Mr. Colgan. I didn't see the July 14th submission, but does the plan that the county and the state are talking about, I guess the county portion of it, does that include sidewalks up on the, I guess it's the eastern side heading north?
Correct.
All the way up to the LIE?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, I haven't seen what you submitted on the 14th. So that for me was important. And, that's, my vote will be conditioned on that tonight. Obviously, they understand that the county has agreed to go ahead and do that. If the county doesn't do that, it falls back on them. They've said they would do it. And then the tier 2 certification, which allows you to provide on-site meal services. What is the tip? Once this is approved from here, you can apply for that. What is the typical processing time of that, if you know? I mean, it's the state, so.
I don't know. I would defer to Karen Borstein with respect to that.
But you do plan on submitting that once this is approved? I guess
Absolutely.
That's
Yes,
important.
that is our goal, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan to give us a report, and then we'll come back for other questions. But those are the two things that were sort of outstanding.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Colgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application was previously heard on January 25th in 2017. Primary concerns raised at that time were the fire code violations and off-site pedestrian safety. The applicant has provided a comprehensive listing of violations that was reviewed by the fire marshal's office and the building division. The fire marshal indicated that most of the life safety violations have been corrected, with the exception of relocating and adding fire protection devices due to the minor construction that took place without the benefit of a building permit. That office indicated it had no objection moving forward with this modification of covenants, and that it would allow the necessary minor changes to the fire protection systems once building permits were issued. The town's building director has indicated that the paperwork submitted for the certificate of compliance is close to being in line with the New York State Building Code. In addition, the applicant will be required to install sidewalks along its frontage of Crooked Hill Road, which is a Suffolk County road, and that will be coordinated with the county when Crooked Hill is reconstructed at an unknown date in the future. Private shuttle service and on-site food service will also help with reducing pedestrian movements. Given that the remaining few violations will be addressed and there are no other external impacts created by the use, staff recommends that the board grant the application subject to the attached covenants and restrictions.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. Are there further questions from members of the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Ms. Moriarty.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, could you explain, provide a little bit of detail just on the nature of the food services that would be approved on a going forward basis? Is that a community kitchen set up where families dine together, or is that separate dining unit or kitchen facilities spread throughout the facility? How does that work? And actually, you're on mute right now, Mr. Brown.
No, it would be more like the cafeteria style setup. It would not be dispersed throughout the building. It would be in one area.
Okay, and is the building currently configured for a commercial kitchen?
It is. But if you want, I could defer to either Ms. Borstein or Ms. Boyd, Ms. Chamberlain, who's on the phone.
Whoever would like
Karen,
to.
would you like to speak?
Yeah. Val, do you want to answer that?
Yes, I can. Hi. Good evening, everyone. So as far as the food service goes, we would set up a cafeteria in order for them to come in, and we would dispense the meals on site. We would have them delivered from a vendor. It's similar to the lunch program that we run right now in the summers, where we get the lunches delivered on site and we just give them out to the residents. So we're going to implement something like that. We don't have a kitchen on site. We're not going to start cooking meals on site. It's all going to come from an outside vendor, and we're going to dispense to the families.
Got it. Okay, great.
And that's with the tier 2 approval, or that's currently?
That's with the tier 2 approval. With the tier 2 certification, you're allowed to provide meals on site. At this point in time, we're not able to do that because we don't have the tier 2 certification. And I just wanted to answer a question you had before about how long it would take to get to tier 2. We are practically there. This is the only holdup that we have right now is the issues that we're having with the town. Otherwise, all of our other services meet their standards. All of our other physical plant requirements meet their standards.
Great, thank you for that.
And thank you. Yes.
Anything further from members of the board? Not seeing any hands or any motions. Mr. Brown, anything further?
No, sir.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Mr. Brown, the other Mr. Brown.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to grant the application based on the CNRs and the staff report.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Brown to grant the application subject to the conditions. Is there a second?
Second.
Frugieri, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it's granted. Thank you. Item 14 on the agenda.
Thank
Town
you.
Board application.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Town Board application recommendation item, Kirk Bar Enterprises LLC, CZ 2019-002, east side of Brookville Avenue, terminus of 47th Street, 205 Brookville, Islip. Applicant requests a change of zone from Residence A to Residence C AA district in order to construct a 2-family dwelling. Good evening. Is the applicant here? Mr. Gray, I think I see you.
Yes.
Go
Can you see
ahead.
me?
Yes, go
Ah,
ahead.
terrific. Good evening. Garrett Gray, Weber Law Group, 290 Broad Hollow Road, Melville, New York, for the applicant. I will be brief. When we last heard this application, I went through how this parcel at 205 Brookville, although zoned Residence A, had been used as a legal prior non-conforming use as industrial for the past 40 years, which had generated obviously complaints from the residents. When we met with the town, they suggested a land swap. We were in favor of that. We spent the next 4 years working with the town and DEC to pick a parcel that would be acceptable, to stake out the wetlands, pay for surveys, et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, 4 years later, the town, even after the contract, the land swap contract was drafted, decided for reasons known only to it, not to pursue the land swap. So we were left with a lot of expenses and nowhere else to go. So we had two options. One was to continue the industrial use at the same intensity as previously used, which would again infuriate the neighbors. And the other was to find another site that we could use for those operations. We did the latter. We met with the town, who agreed that we could seek a change of zone to a 2-family house as opposed to a 1-family house as Residence A, in order to recoup some of the expenses that we incurred in the land swap process, and also this will lower the intensity of the use dramatically. So it's really a win-win for all concerned. At the last meeting, the board had asked us to submit proposed elevation for the two-family house to make sure that it fit into the style of the neighborhood. We did that. We were advised by planning staff that they were happy with the elevation. And here we are ready to go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. I just want to clarify a couple of things. I did, after our last meeting, which was a little while back, get some more information through the town attorney's office regarding, there's been questions that you've made statements here at this meeting and the previous meeting that the town walked away from the process and left you hanging out there. It's the contention, as obviously they didn't walk away from the process. They expended a lot of time into the process to approve it. Their contention that the I guess, appraisal of the subject property was artificially high based on the fact that it was for an industrial use, whereas the new use would not be an industrial use, obviously, if it was put through. So it would be as for a residential property. So the appraisal was of issue. It's not like they just walked away because they threw their hands up in the air and walked away. They were making considerations. And I'd also just like to add that then there would be the cost of obviously maintaining, securing, and insuring the property. So there are other issues involved. I just wanted to recharacterize what you said, that they made the best time to walk away.
I'm aware that Mr. Sissio and I have differing opinions on this. And that
part of this, I just wanted to, state on the record as you're saying.
I understand, and I was actually going to say he has disputed some of that, and luckily we don't have to resolve it tonight. Where he and I have agreed to disagree, but
I just wanted to be able to state that their position or his position or the town's
Sure,
position.
sure.
You're
I
making
can appreciate that.
Not
Yes.
part of this hearing. It would be unfair
Yes.
to him that something is
Not
left there that
That's why I didn't go through the entire song and dance. I didn't feel it
doesn't
necessary.
represent both sides. But I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan for a report, and then we can come back for any questions that we have.
Sure.
Mr. Colgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application was previously heard on March 7th in 2019. Primary concerns raised at that time were flooding and that there were no other two-family residences that existed in the neighborhood. Flooding would be addressed by the engineering division to ensure that sufficient drainage was installed that would not adversely impact the neighborhood. The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation would also oversee the project if the proposed work is within 100 feet of flagged freshwater wetlands. To date, the staff is not aware of any two-family dwellings in the area that did not consist of accessory apartments. However, this is a proposal to provide a use that is more in keeping with a residential neighborhood than an industrial use. Should the board agree, the staff recommends that the board grant subject to the attached covenants and restrictions.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. I have I guess, a question for you first, Mr. Colgan. Last March, I know we discussed this. I think it was last March, a year ago March. It's been that long. I guess it's been that long. This, project, and there was a question about, has the town board on its own already rezoned this to a single family? Or is that accurate, or am I?
Yes, the town rezoned the parcel from industrial 1 to residence A, I believe back in 1986 on its own motion.
I don't know if that issue's been readdressed with the town board, but my question would be, you're, essentially asking us tonight as the planning board to go ahead and make an approval of something that the town did on its own, the town elected board did on its own motion, which for me is questionable. I don't know if Mr. Gray or Mr. Colgan, has there been discussions with the town board regarding this? I mean, obviously there's some guidance we have from them which says this has been rezoned to single family.
I mean, I wasn't involved in any of the land purchasing discussions whatsoever, so I have no indication whether or not they were going to push for a two-family, or I would say most likely probably retain the existing zoning. And if the town was going to do anything, either sell the land. We don't build homes. I'm not aware that there would be any proposal for a two-family, if that's what you're asking.
And obviously, Mr. Chairman, this would have to go to the town board for the change of zone after this board. So we would address the prior zone, but keep in mind, the alternative would be to keep using the property as an industrial use legal prior non-conforming, which doesn't make anybody in the area happy.
Yeah, well, I mean, those that spoke that night, I think would rather leave it, if I recall, it's been over a year, I'd have to go back and look at it, were opposed to the CAA zoning there. But Mr. Hogan, maybe can you explain where the town typically would put a CAA zoning?
Yeah, so typically, in my experience, where you see CAA, we generally see them outside some of our older downtowns. For instance, out here, near downtown Islip, there's a cluster of those there. There's a cluster near the older portion of the downtown in East Islip, also similar with Bayshore. So generally speaking, you'll see two families where a little more density is warranted near goods, services, and mass transit. And that's why, you normally see it in older downtown areas.
And is there CAA presently anywhere in this area or in this neighborhood?
No, I don't believe there are now.
Thank you. Those are my questions. Are there further questions from the board? Mr. Matamore.
Sean, what's the square footage of the parcel? The square footage of the parcel? I think it has a bearing, but I'd be curious of the square footage of the parcel of land.
It's a little more than half an acre.
It's a little more, well, because single A is 11,250, so that's the reason why I asked. If there's 22,000, that might be at least a factor that could support the idea, at least, of having a two-family dwelling. I was at the hearing the first time around, and there was certainly opposition from the neighbors that it would change the nature and character of their neighborhood. And I think with the guidance from the planning department in the planning stages of this, and if the land is substantial enough to justify a two-family dwelling, that might affect the outcome of this decision as to whether or not it's warranted. If it were a lot less than a half an acre, then I think it would be starting to stretch the anticipation of a change to family.
It's actually a little more than half an acre, Mr. Matamore. It's 23,087 square feet.
Okay, well, I'm glad you brought that up because I think the board should be aware of it. And I think it's at least a factor that could be used as supporting the idea. I also believe that you can design and with the guidance of the planning department, a two-family house that will be in the nature and character of a one-family dwelling.
And we've done that.
Family dwellings, but it takes some effort and some consideration so that it doesn't change the nature and character of the neighborhood of Brookville, which is a very quiet, single-family dwelling block. And we're certainly not out to aggravate those neighbors that we're changing the nature and character of the neighborhood, assuming that we go that way, that the vote has not even been taken, and it will ultimately be up to the town board. But you answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Bruno?
Mr. Gray, I know it's not specifically in the purview of zoning, but has there been a discussion with the Suffolk County Health Department about doing a two-family house here and how to satisfy their regulations?
We have not had discussions with the health department yet. Obviously, when we go forward, we will, and we would garner any approvals we needed from them, but that would be, we felt, slightly premature.
Why did you not consider, since the parcel is big enough to do it and the Residence A zoning, why are you not considering, and this is one of my questions, it's related to the health, why are you not looking, and it's kind of where Mr. Matamore was coming from, why are you not considering two single-family houses?
Quite honestly, the only answer to that question, it's a good question, is this is the direction that the owner wanted to go.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, to Mr. Bruno's point is, I'd love to hear the health department comments on it. And my other question would be, if it's going to be approved as a two-family, would you agree to a restriction on the property that would be owner occupied?
No, no. We had already discussed that with planning. But the owner will be pursuant to the covenants required to make sure that the property is kept up, that lawn is cut, snow is removed, et cetera, et cetera.
Most landowners are responsible for that. They don't always get compliant. Living there sometimes makes it a little different when you're walking out into that. Are there further questions from the board? Is there a motion from the board? I'd love to hear the county health departments weigh in on whether or not they would be going for this. What about restrictions on a 55 and over, or like would it be considered senior housing or something along those lines?
No.
No conditions.
I mean, there were no conditions asked of by planning staff as far as it being 55 and over.
I'm
That's.
asking that question.
I'm sorry?
I'm asking that question. I don't know that they asked that question. I'm just asking, we wouldn't go for owner occupied. Would that be something that would be considered?
That I would have to check with my client.
Okay. So my honest, Mr. Matamore, you're on mute.
I would feel comfortable making a motion to grant the application, but subject to covenants that are going to be worked out that take into consideration that it's a two-family dwelling in a almost completely one-family zone. I disagreed with the neighbors when they spoke at the original hearing that can't be done. It certainly can be done. It's done all the time, but it takes cooperation by the applicant and the understanding of the planning department to have an input into the appearance of the structures. It's the appearance that's the concern. It isn't the population or the number of people that are going to be in the home. I don't think, because it's literally double the size of their parcels. So that's why I partially asked that question. But it's going to, I think this should be brought to an end. There's been a tremendous amount of hours and spent on both sides. And I would like to see it resolved. I hope we're not discussing it 2 years from now. And but obviously with the understanding to make the effort to make it fit in with that zoning on Brookville Avenue. So I would make that motion, certainly if the architects for the applicant feel that they can work with planning and work out some covenants and restrictions to do that, then I would be in favor of the application and move it to be granted, subject to those conditions to be worked out.
So, Mr. Matamore, you're making a motion to grant the application subject to the conditions of, just restate them for the record, I'm sorry.
Yes, subject to conditions to be worked out between the applicant and the planning department as to the appearance and it fitting into the neighborhood, which is substantially, not substantially, completely a one-family dwelling. And I think it solves both problems, and I think it can be done. But if they can't work it out and they have to bring it back to us because it hasn't been worked out, then it would have to go to a denial, I would think. But hopefully they can work out the differences.
Mr. Matamore, I'll accept that as a motion. The conditions are a little long there to incorporate for me to repeat.
That'd be fine.
I would say that I am.
Don't ask me to repeat it again, because I probably stated differently than I just did. So,
I'm going to ask for a second before I make a comment to see if there's a second to that motion.
okay.
Is there a second to Mr. Matamore's motion? Not seeing a second to that motion, I was just going to suggest that there are issues of 55 and over, owner occupied, the health department, and the rest that I think we'd like some guidance on. I'm not necessarily opposed to this right now. I'm not necessarily in favor of it right now. I'd like to know the answers to those questions. So we're not back here in 2 years. If you can get the answers, I will direct staff to put it back on for the next meeting.
Okay.
I will get the answers.
Getting those three things clarified, and if there are other, Mr. Brown might have a question, or Brown.
Yeah, well, I have a question, then I would make a motion. But my question is, and it's along the lines of what Mr. Bruno brought up in reference to the health department. If we send this forward to change zone, what happens if the health department then disapproves it?
If you recommend changing the zone and the town board, let's say, goes along and approves that and changes the zone, and the health department denies it, you can still build single-family homes in a CAA zone. So we would then be forced to go that route.
Okay. But based on the conversations we had tonight, I'd like to make a recommendation and a motion to reserve decision tonight and bring it back quickly if we could to the next meeting.
Motion by Mr. Brown to reserve decision, bringing it back for the next meeting if the issues are resolved. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Mr. Frugieri, got you all beat. Mike, you were close second. Gary, you're right behind them. Tim, you were sleeping on that one. I don't know what happened.
It's getting late.
So I will notify Mr. Colgan once we have the answers to all those issues.
That'd be great. So motion by Mr. Brown to reserve, second by Mr. Frugieri. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions were reserved. Mr. Gray will wait to hear back from you, or Mr. Colgan will wait to hear back on if we can get it on for the next meeting based upon you having the answers. We'll put it on. If you don't have the answers, we'll discuss what the steps are.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Item 15 on the agenda was adjourned. That was Sunrise Development. Item 16, Town Board Application Recommendation Item, the House of Judah, CZ 2020-001, vacant land south of North Research Place and east side of Creative Drive, approximately 1,013 feet west of Carlton Avenue, County Route 17, 0 Creative Drive, Central Islip. Applicant requests a change of zone from Planned Development District Office, PDD off, to Planned Development District Retail Services, PDD-RS, in order to construct a house of worship, community center, and retail stores. Site plan modifications are required as part of this application. Good evening, Mr. Germano.
Good evening, members of the chairman, members of the board. William Germano of Germano and Cahill, 4250 Veterans Highway, Holbrook, New York. This matter was first heard by the board on February 5th, 2020. And this application is, the purpose of the application is to construct the church with a community center containing an auditorium with a stage, offices, hall and kitchen, and gym, and 3 small retail spaces. After the last hearing, we adjourned so that the town's outside traffic consulting could review the parking study. We received comments and addressed those comments and made a good effort to make changes to the site plan and to the building. Our architect, James German, worked hard in altering the building to reduce it slightly in size by about 500 square feet, but that allowed us to reduce parking, our parking requirements by approximately, I believe it was 15 spaces. What we had done was we reconfigured some of the parking as well to add more spaces. So our parking relaxation that we requested is being reduced. So instead of the initial 93 parking spots we were seeking a relaxation for, it's now down to approximately 74 spaces. So I think we made many improvements to the site plan to accommodate the town's outside traffic consultant. So I'll just defer to Sean Colgan. And if the board has any questions on anything we've done, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. We'll have some questions. I'm going to go to Mr. Colgan for the report, and then we can come back for the questions. Mr. Colgan, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application was previously heard on February 5th of this year. Primary concern raised by the planning staff was the magnitude of the parking relaxation. Since that time, the applicant proposed a smaller building which allowed for additional parking on site. The revised number of parking spots would meet the minimum town parking requirements for the church use alone. The town's traffic consultant has noted that IT requirements are more stringent for church use and recommended that 132 spaces be provided, and that providing 115 spaces on site is likely to result in more frequent occurrences of demand above capacity, and the possibility of providing 80% or peak demand or 123 spaces would limit these occurrences. As also discussed, there is convenient legal on-street parking available to help meet the parking demand during those occurrences. Traffic safety has recommended that parking be prohibited along the horizontal curvature of Creative Drive, as well as from across the street to maintain the safety of the church patrons who might otherwise have to cross through traffic. So based on that, if the board is comfortable with occasional overflow parking on the street when it will be generally underutilized and not, typically a frequently traveled street during when we would expect services to be at their peak demand, then the staff would recommend that the board grant the application subject to the attached covenants and restrictions.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. So my question, two questions. One I'll get back to for Sean, but the first question really is parking. Can you really just speak to the parking demand? And again, Mr. Germano, and just go through how we got to that reduction that you're stating? You're muted. There you go.
Yes, on the, what we had done on the original plan that the board had seen, on the north side of the building, there were approximately 3 spots that were parallel parking spots. What we did was the architect took out the center of the building and reduced it a little bit so that we could take some space on that north side and create head-in parking. So now the plan shows 17 parking spots across that north side of the building in that row. So we were able to add parking there. What we had also done was there is a transformer on the west along the curve that occupied approximately 2 spaces, and it's marked there. And we had moved that transformer to the far end of the site so that we could add 2 spaces there. What we had also done is, I think this came at the request of the planning department, was we added 3 land banked parking stalls along the western side of the building in the row that has 11 spots. And so we had proposed that today to the planning department. So it's not shown on the document you're looking at right now, but we have proposed 3 land bank stalls. And those are the changes that we made. In doing that, we reduced the number of seats in the auditorium by 8, and we reduced the number of seats in the hall by approximately 20.
Thank you. And you've heard that the recommendation from traffic safety to parking be prohibited along the curvature of the Creative Drive out there?
Yes, no objection.
There are further questions from the board? I guess Mr. Germano or Mr. Colgan, just to answer a quick question for me on this. So it's House of Judah, but there's a retail component as well. This is a taxable parcel then?
I mean, my response would be up to the tax assessor. I imagine if there's a component of the site that's not directly related to worship, it could possibly not be entirely tax exempt. But I don't have that information from the tax assessor as of now.
Thank you. Further questions from the board? Anything further from Mr. Germano?
Nothing further.
Thank you. Is there a motion? I only have 3 on my screen right now, so
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to grant the application based on the CNRs and the staff report.
thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Brown to grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. Is there a second?
Second.
Bruno, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, is granted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 17 on the agenda, Town Board application recommendation item, Saxon Sunrise Realty LLC, CZ 2020-014, south side of Sunrise Highway Service Road, State Route 27, approximately 135 feet east of Saxon Avenue, Bayshore, 2036 Sunrise Highway. Applicant requests a change of zone from Business 1 to Business 3, a planning board special permit for a vehicle repair use pursuant to 68-302.1C and a modification of covenants and restrictions associated with TC 4546 in order to leave an existing vehicle repair use. A minor subdivision is also requested as part of this application. Good evening, Mr. Dina Kohler, if you're with us.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Appearing on behalf of the applicant, Eugene L. Dina Kohler, 200 Railroad Avenue, Salem, New York. A planning board public information hearing was held on June 3rd, 2020, Mr. Chairman. The applicant presented information to the board for a recommendation for various relief to permit an existing and operating Firestone tire sales and repair operation to continue to operate in its present location on an existing 19-acre shopping center. The Firestone tire and sales and repair operation has existed on the site since April of 1973. There will be no change in the layout or function of the Firestone operation or the balance of the shopping center, which has approximately 177,000 square feet of retail space. The record was held open for 30 days, and if no issues were raised, the relief under the planning board jurisdiction would be approved, and I trust the board would give a positive recommendation to the relief required from the town board. Covenants and restrictions were received today from Mr. Colgan, transmitted to the principal of the applicant, and it would appear certainly that the conditions will be acceptable to the applicant. I request that the board give this matter an affirmative recommendation for the town board change of zone and the modification of the previously imposed covenants and restrictions, and that this board approve the minor subdivision application and the special permit for the vehicle repair use pursuant to 68-3021C. And I will defer to Mr. Colgan for his report.
Thank you, Mr. DiNicola, for your brief and concise report. I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The hour is moving.
This application was previously heard at the June 3rd hearing. No significant issues were raised at that time. Given that the existing vehicle repair is a complementary use to the shopping center and that it is not adjacent to residences, the staff recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached covenants and restrictions.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. I'm going to ask if there are any questions. I think I know your answer, Mr. DiNicola, but would you like to state anything further?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Mr. Moriarty.
I would move to grant subject to the covenants and restrictions.
Motion to grant subject to the covenants and restrictions, second by Mr. Brown. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions. Your application is granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
You're not leaving us, Gene, I don't think, but we're going to see what happens now. Town board application recommendation item, Trek Bayshore LLC, CZ 2019-013, southeast corner of Union Boulevard, County Route 50, number 1700 and 4th Avenue, Bayshore, 1700 Union Boulevard, Bayshore. Applicant requests a change of zone from business district to downtown development district in order to construct an apartment house consisting of 449 apartments. Site plan modifications are required as part of this application. Good evening, Mr. DiNicola.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Appearing on behalf of the applicant Eugene L. DiNicola, 200 Railroad Avenue, Sayville, New York. First, Mr. Chairman, I wish to correct the notice. The number of apartment units have been reduced from 449 to 418. So I'd like to make that correction in the notice. This matter was originally heard by this board on November 14, 2019, at a public information hearing. Extensive testimony and evidence was submitted regarding the proposed development. Meetings were had with various interested groups, including the Bayshore Chamber of Commerce, Bayshore Lions Club, Bayshore Restaurant Association, and so forth. In excess of 80 letters of support has been received and delivered to the Planning Commissioner, and I believe to you as well, Mr. Chairman. The proposed development has been modified to address various comments from the chairman and the planning board, from the planning commissioner, and from the town's traffic consultant. The applicant, following a recent review, reduced the number of units proposed to 418 from 449. Originally, it was 495. It also eliminated the 5th floor of the project. Also, there'll be no residential units and there'll be no 5th floor, except for a 1,300 square foot roof amenity. The parking ratio will be 1.48 spaces per unit in keeping with the request of the planning staff. Its proximity to the Bayshore train station, which is right across the street, creates the ultimate transit-oriented development. The redevelopment of this 10-plus acre site represents a $165 million investment in Bayshore and is precisely what is needed to continue and perpetuate the financial revival of Bayshore, especially following the pandemic, which we are experiencing. This development creates a walkable community and provides the necessary mix of housing, which is in demand today. This site currently does not generate any tax revenue. The proposed development will generate substantial tax revenue, as was submitted in the testimony at the public information hearing for the town and the school district. It is projected that the new residents from this development, based on the reduced number of units, will spend approximately $13 million annually within the town of Islip. It is also going to create a substantial number of construction jobs and during construction, and a substantial number of permanent jobs following the completion. I want to be brief. We've heard this application, and it has been reviewed, I believe, extensively by staff, and I believe also by you, Mr. Chairman. So at this time, I respectfully request that the planning board give an affirmative recommendation for the change of zone to the downtown development district as requested by the applicant, which in fact, this parcel should in fact be zone DDD. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there are any questions, I will attempt to answer them, but I also have all my experts available to respond to any questions from the board.
Thank you, Mr. DiNicola, and thanks once again for the brevity in your presentation. It's appreciated.
You're welcome, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Cogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application was reserved on June 3rd. The concerns raised at that time were the magnitude of the parking relaxation, the height of the building, and the number of units. Since that time, the applicant has removed the 5th floor, which lowered the number of units to 418 and increased the parking ratio to approximately 1.48 per dwelling unit. This is comparable to other larger developments recently approved in the past by the board. Given the fact that the applicant appears to have satisfied those concerns, the staff recommends that the board grant the application subject to the attached covenants restrictions. One thing the staff does want to note, we did receive feedback that perhaps a small grocery component could be added to the overall application in order to cut down on trips made by pedestrians, as well as for other apartment developments in the nearby area, as the nearest grocery store is a bit away. So the staff just leaves that there for this board's consideration. But other than that, the overall project does appear to comply with the spirit and intent of the downtown development district.
Thank you, Mr. Cogan. Questions from the board? Not seeing any. I first want to thank the Coglins. I know on the call we had several meetings over the past several months, and certainly they took into heart and considered the requests and the comments from the planning staff and the planning board. So I just want to say thank you for that. You may, as Mr. Colgan stated earlier, as this moves through the process, have a request to add a retail component in there. But from our perspective, thank you for taking the time to consider it and taking the time to meet with us. Mr. Moriarty?
Yeah, I'd like to underscore that same point. I think there was a great cooperation shown by the applicant in working with both staff and the board as well. And I think there's been a general sense that this is a good project and we want to see it there. There had to be some give and take, which is natural in a process like this. But I do want to express my appreciation for the applicant, diligently working through those issues with us. And I think hopefully tonight coming to a good result.
Mr. Chairman, if I may say, Mr. Moriarty, members of the board, you will not deal with finer people than the Coglins. I will attest to that.
Right. Thank you.
Anything further from the board? Anything further, Ms. DiNicola?
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a motion? Mr. Matamore? You're on mute. Tim, I think that mute button cost us like 35 minutes tonight.
I make a motion grant the application subject to the discussions just held. And I want to compliment both sides in working it out.
Thank you. The motion to grant the application subject to the conditions. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Moriarty. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It's approved. Thank you all very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I appreciate everything.
You're welcome.
Who's going to win this? Mr. Brown, is that a motion to adjourn? You're on mute, but I'll accept that because I can read lips as a motion to adjourn, I hope.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bruno. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? Have a good night, everyone. Be safe. Thank you.
Good night and be safe.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.